Chapter 21, Practicing the Summoning Spell, Meet Miss Otter. That's hard to say. The sorting ceremony decides the house, George said with a mischievous grin. It might be a bit rough to get through the sorting. Indeed, Fred blinked, then switched to a mock tragic tone. To get into the school, you have to survive the terrifying sorting ceremony. Lee Jordan spoke solemnly. Mate, I believe in you. It's basically a duel to the death. You'll be fine. The three of them traded menacing remarks with a shared grin and slipped out of the compartment. Vizette, however, stayed calm. The sorting ceremony. It shouldn't be that scary, right? I can't promise, Cho Chang said, trying not to laugh. We should get to school by evening. Everything will be revealed then. The train slid out of London and sped across the countryside. Farms and flocks dotted the landscape. By noon, warm sunlight poured into the compartment, and the clatter of a snack trolley came down the aisle. A plump, middle-aged woman pushed the compartment door open. Anything to eat, dears? Sweets, cakes, snacks, pies? Take your pick. She displayed a dazzling variety of treats. Vizette remembered the odd biscuits Xenophilius used to make at Luna's, made from some strange ingredient and flour, with a strong oniony taste and no sweetness. Meals in the orphanage in his previous life had been balanced but tasteless. He had learned to treat food simply as fuel. Faced with a proper choice now, he turned to Cho Chang for advice. Do you have a recommendation? I haven't seen most of these before. It's hard to choose. Each has its own charm, Cho said, thinking. If you want a real experience, try Bertie Bott's every flavor beans, some chewing gum, and chocolate frogs. The prices were ridiculously cheap. Vizette bought several of each of Cho's suggestions for only 15 nuts. He grinned. This is the most magical place. In his old life currency, that would be around 5 yuan, incredibly cheap. The packaging was bright and eye-catching, especially the blue box of the chocolate frog, trimmed in gold at the top and bottom. Thank you. Cho took the chocolate frog Vizette handed her, opened the box, and a chocolate frog leapt out, describing a brown arc in the air. Vizette, quick to react, gently pinched the frog and looked astonished. It actually moves? Amazing! Through his magic eye, he saw the chocolate frog's surface was laced with magic and bore a faint, shifting symbol. The trading cards are great too, Cho said, pulling a card from the box. It shimmered with a similar fuzzy charm. On it was a portrait of an old man with a white beard, Albus Dumbledore. The picture smiled and nodded at Vizette, then slipped back into the card. Why did he disappear? Vizette asked. It's magic, Cho explained with a smile. There are moving pictures in the wizarding world. Sometimes they move from one picture to another. The most valuable thing in a chocolate frog is the card. People collect them. The biographical notes are quite interesting. Vizette flipped the card to the back and read, widely regarded as the greatest wizard, defeated Gellert Grindelwald in 1945. Collaborated with Nicholas Flamel on alchemy, creator of the Philosopher's Stone. The card was fascinating, and the frog itself tasted wonderful, a rich milky chocolate that melted smoothly and balanced chocolate bitterness and sweetness perfectly. Vizette's eyes lit up. I should send some to Luna, and to Mr. Lovegood. He jumped up and rushed into the aisle to find the witch who had been selling them. Cho Chang was popular in Ravenclaw. Students drifted by to chat. Just after noon, a pretty brown-haired girl climbed into the compartment. It was Penelope Clearwater, a fifth-year Ravenclaw. She wrapped her arms around Cho and confided in a worried voice. Cho, I'm so stressed. I have my OWLs this year, and I just became a prefect. She tugged at the blue and bronze badge on her chest. It glittered. Cho patted her shoulder. That's a good thing. I heard prefects get a special lavatory. Very swish. Benefits mean responsibility, Penelope sighed. Like patrolling the train. I swapped shifts with Percy Weasley, and I have a meeting later. I just came to sit for a bit during my break and to practice magic. I haven't cast many spells over the summer. I've wasted time. She pulled her wand from her pocket and handed a notebook to Cho. Cho, can you check if I learned this properly? Summoning charm, incantation, axio. This spell pulls a distant object toward you, Cho explained. Precautions. You must concentrate and clearly picture the target. It can't be used on living things. She pointed the wand at Cho. Notebook. Axio. The notebook flipped a few pages in Cho's hands. I'm out of practice, Penelope muttered. I need to focus. Picture it clearly. Notebook. Accio. Vizette had a vague recollection of the spell from flipping through the Standard Book of Spells, Grade 4. The chapter on the summoning charm was long and a little dizzying, but Penelope's notes were clear. He felt he could try it. He had wanted to attempt the charm before when Lee Jordan was practicing the mending charm, but circumstances had been awkward then. Now, with a quiet compartment and Penelope's attempts for reference, it seemed like the perfect moment. He set the chocolate frog box across from him, drew his bayonet-like wand, and gently pulled it back. Chocolate frog, Accio! The blue box trembled as if tugged by an invisible string and moved toward him twice, then paused. The learning environment mattered. Penelope's trial and error and explanations helped him. He tried again and again, and each time the box moved a little closer. Just then, hurried footsteps came down the aisle. "Excuse me, have you seen a toad? Neville's toad is missing," someone gasped. Vizette looked up. A breathless girl stood in the doorway, fluffy brown hair, chubby cheeks, and a pair of prominent front teeth that gave her an otter-like look. Vizette instinctively tightened his hand on the chocolate frog box and, out of habit, murmured the words again. "Chocolate frog, Accio!" The box shot into his palm at a startling speed. The girl's eyes widened in disbelief. What kind of magic was that? Why hasn't that been in any of the books? The girl sat down, and Penelope and Cho Chang stopped their practice and turned to look at Vizette and the new arrival. "Oh, I practiced a few spells at home," the girl said, a little breathless with excitement. "Just simple drills. I thought I knew everything I needed to this year. So many strange things happened when I was coming to school. When I got my acceptance letter, it felt like magic. From what I've read, Hogwarts is the best school for magic," she added. "What I mean is, I've memorized all this year's textbooks, but I haven't seen this kind of magic before. Oh, by the way, I'm Hermione Granger. What are your names?" She rattled the words off so fast she seemed to be using up the air in the compartment. "That's Cho Chang, and I'm Penelope Clearwater," Penelope answered. "Did you just see Vizette cast a spell?" "Yes." Hermione nodded so quickly her hair swung. Her eyes were bright. He shouted, "Chocolate frog, come!" And a chocolate frog flew right from the seat into his hand. Penelope blinked. "You learned the summoning charm?" "It was only my first real success," Vizette said, smiling faintly. He'd been tidying his area after practice, mouthed a spell by habit, and he couldn't say why. He'd thought of something Luna had once told him. A witch or wizard needs a wish when they cast a spell. The magic needs intention to be guided. He'd pictured the frog and wanted it, and the spell had obeyed. "Can you do it again?" Penelope leaned forward. "All right." Vizette pointed his wand at the notebook in Cho's lap. Following Penelope's prompting, he fixed the image of the notebook in his mind, picturing its cover, its weight, the crease at the corner, and just as Luna had suggested, he gave the spell a wish. He wanted that notebook in his hand. "Notebook, come." The notebook shot out of Cho's hands like an arrow, cleaving the air in a perfect straight line and landing neatly in Vizette's fingers. "Merlin's beard, that's fourth-year magic," Penelope said, stunned. "Is there something wrong with me?" "That's fourth year?" Hermione leaned in, eager. "Did you get fourth-year textbooks early? Have you already mastered the earlier years?" Vizette shook his head. "I was listening to some practice earlier, and I picked up a bit." "Listening in a bit?" Penelope pressed a hand to her face, half laughing, half exasperated. "He's a first year, and he's doing fourth-year charm work, and here I am, revising and still failing." Cho Chang only smiled and tried to soothe her. "You're a prefect, Penelope. That's a recognition from the school, from Professor Flitwick." "Maybe you're just anxious," Vizette said, trying to be helpful, thinking of the pre-exam tension from his other life. "There's a big exam coming up. Feeling unsettled is normal," Cho agreed. "Miss Clearwater, did you have lunch after your dorm patrol?" "No," Penelope shook her head. "I just finished my patrol and went straight to find Cho." "There's your problem," Cho brightened. "You should eat. My grandfather used to say, 'People need food, iron needs steel. Miss a meal and you'll be weak.'" Vizette produced a small box of chocolate frogs. "Here, some sugar might help with the nerves." "Your technique is fine," he added. "You followed the right steps when you tried the summoning charm this afternoon. I think it's not your skill that's failing, just your state of mind. Get back to your normal composure, and you'll be fine." "Is that so? Thank you." Penelope sounded skeptical, but she obediently unwrapped a chocolate frog and ate it. Her shoulders eased a fraction. How did you know that would help? Hermione asked, puzzled. My classmates never listened to me. Vizette shrugged. I didn't do anything special, just offered food. Sometimes it's enough. She said she's worried about OWLs, Penelope muttered. Pre-exam nerves are normal, though it seems early in the year to be this bad. Were you a muggle before? Hermione asked suddenly. You seem so familiar with exams. She tilted her head and studied him. Vizette, are you the Obscurus the Daily Prophet wrote about? I'm not saying I'm scared, just that I'm new to all this magic, you know? Vizette nodded, a little helpless. Sometimes less explanation is better. Saying too much can create misunderstandings. Maybe you're right, Hermione murmured, frowning as if thinking of some awkward past moment. Penelope picked the notebook back up and with renewed confidence sent it skimming back into Vizette's hand. Notebook, come, she said, and it did. Then she sent it back to Cho with a pleased laugh. That's how it should feel. I used to be able to do this. How did I lose it? I need to help Neville find his toad, Hermione announced, standing up. I promised him I would. Hogwarts keeps toads sometimes, Penelope said, talking faster now that she felt better. They're useful for certain practicals. In the Middle Ages, toads were a common wizarding pet. History of Magic had a bit about muggles misunderstanding wizards, Cho added. They used to think wizards would turn muggles into toads. It's possible in theory, but you need very advanced magic, Penelope said. Later, the ministry banned using living creatures for experiments, so fewer people keep toads. Thanks, Miss Clearwater, Hermione said. You've been helpful, but I promised Neville. Perhaps I can help, Vizette offered. While Penelope had been talking about toads and the old uses in history of magic, Vizette had been working quietly in the back of his mind. He had grafted an ancient approach onto the summoning charm, redirecting its power to affect living things at a very basic level. The result coalesced as a new page in his memory. Ancient magic, modified summoning charm, basic creature capture. Guide ancient energy into the summoning charm to strengthen its force and adapt it for use on simple creatures. 23. The Unidentified Dark Wizard. Have you seen it? Hermione asked in a rush. It's Neville's toad, Trevor. Vizette shook his head gently. No, I haven't. Can you describe what he looks like? I'll go fetch Neville. Hermione hurried out of the compartment. Penelope smiled faintly. Are you going to use a summoning charm? Vizette nodded. Yes, I want to try. You do know, Penelope began carefully, a summoning charm normally only works on inanimate objects. There are exceptions, Cho Chang said from the side, but only for very simple creatures like flobberworms. Even then, it's rare. Why not let him try? Cho added with a grin. Vizette's special. This morning he helped a third year with his prep. There's such a thing? Penelope's surprise was real. Curiosity in practice isn't wrong. As a Ravenclaw, I suppose I shouldn't begrudge it. Vizette smiled. He liked Ravenclaw's atmosphere. Since coming to this magical world, he wanted nothing more than to learn, perhaps even go to Sweden with Luna to look for crumple-horned snorkax, and to explore its countless unknowns. Magical creatures, ruined wizarding sites, the breadth of magic itself, everything called to him. Lee Jordan's introduction to the Four Houses had given him a basic impression. If he could get into Ravenclaw, it would be a fine place to build the foundation for future travels. Hermione returned, leading a round-faced boy with tear-streaked cheeks. Thank you, he stammered. Hermione said you could help me find Trevor. Vizette handed him a handful of tissues. I need a clear description. What does Trevor look like? The more specific you are, the better chance I have of finding him. Thank you. The boy blew his nose. His sobs eased. He's about the size of both my palms, dark brown, and he's got 13 bumps on his back. The boy cared deeply for Trevor. The details were precise. With his description and gestures, Vizette formed a clear mental image. He drew his wand, murmured the charm, and flicked it. Trevor, Accio! The maledictus core in his wand pulsed, releasing a surge of ancient magic that flowed up the shaft. The wand glowed a silver blue. Every head in the compartment turned toward the door. In the corridor outside, a commotion rose. Look, a flying toad! Ah, it touched my hair! Who brings a toad on the train? Where's it going? Amid frantic, panicked croaks, a plump toad appeared at the doorway, paddling wildly. It lunged forward helplessly toward Wizette. His eyelids flicked. The summoning charm slipped from his control. The toad seemed to free-fall the last few feet and landed squarely in Neville's hands. Merlin's beard. That's a huge toad. Summoning charms shouldn't even work on animals. Penelope rubbed her eyes and, muttering, opened a box of chocolate frogs. Just as I thought, Cho said with a smile. That was interesting. Neville kept thanking him between breaths. Thank you so much. I don't know what to say. My name's Neville. Neville Longbottom. Hermione launched into a rapid-fire set of questions. Wizette, which house will you join? Gryffindor? Headmaster Dumbledore was from there. I haven't decided. Probably Ravenclaw, if I can choose. Wizette answered, distracted. He was watching the chocolate frog card he'd taken earlier. He'd just seen Dumbledore's picture flicker back to life. There was something different about the image now, more spark in the eyes, and Wizette felt a warmth of goodwill in it. You should tell them who helped, Cho said, finally nudging Hermione and Neville away. After all, Trevor's been found. Hermione and Neville thanked him again and left. Wizette let out a long breath. Half an hour of gratefulness and questions had worn him out. They really are energetic, Cho chuckled. Yes. Penelope stood and straightened her prefect badge. I have a meeting to go to. This badge might as well be glowing to remind me. She smiled and left. Outside, the sky deepened. Crimson and purple bled into one another above the passing mountains and forests, giving the scenery a spectral quality. Soon a hollow voice echoed through the carriage. In 5 minutes, the Hogwarts Express will arrive at the station. Please leave your luggage on the train. It will be delivered to your dormitories. Dumbledore set the chocolate frog card on his desk, smiling. Remarkable talent. Could he do this merely by touching a wand? The smile faded as he turned away from a darker memory. He will need proper guidance. We cannot allow what happened before to happen again. A Harry, a Wizette, both will require special arrangements. It seems I shall be busy. There was a knock at the door. Professor McGonagall entered in a dark green robe. Headmaster, is this year's sorting list ready? Just in time. Dumbledore rose and waved. A parchment scroll rose from the desk and flew into McGonagall's hands. The calligraphy was neat, the emerald ink still tacky as she examined it. She frowned at one name. Wizette's surname is Lovegood? What was his original name? We couldn't verify it, Dumbledore admitted with a helpless shrug. The matter with that dark wizard, everything about it is shrouded in mystery. So we use Lovegood. It was done for his protection, and we never publicized the original name. It wasn't until today, after he boarded the express, that I had Xenophilius finalize the paperwork. Dumbledore's tone was quiet. McGonagall nodded. A necessary precaution. We didn't expect the Parkinson family to react so strongly when the news leaked. It is past now. Dumbledore waved a hand. The old rune spore holds little value. Using an egg as compensation was a small punishment and a warning. McGonagall's concern didn't wholly fade. Do you think they'll try to retaliate? No, Dumbledore smiled. I made it clear I will keep a close watch on the boy. So long as Lord Voldemort has not returned, they would be too cautious to act rashly. That is reassuring. McGonagall took a tattered hat from a cabinet and folded the sorting list under her arm. I must go. The train arrives soon. She left the headmaster's office. Dumbledore watched her retreating figure, waved, and his star-spangled purple robe rose to settle about his shoulders. A matching pointed hat hovered up and landed on his head. Satisfied, he closed the office door softly behind him. That amazing? How did they do it? Wizette leaned forward, eyes bright with curiosity. It can't be just ordinary magic. How did they know where we live? Cho Chang considered for a moment. That's complicated. Maybe it wasn't a person at all. It might have been a kind of magical servant. She tilted her head. We call them house elves. Wizette repeated the new word slowly. House elves? Cho stretched and rubbed her arms. They look a bit like imps in size, but far friendlier. House elves live in old wizarding manners, taking care of household chores and obeying their master's orders without question. A well-trained house elf is very hard for wizards to notice. I've never seen one up close either. Before Wizette could ask more, the carriage erupted into another commotion. High, excited squeals and a ripple of pushing. Students in their robes surged toward the back. Sounds like Harry Potter's in a fight, someone breathed. Harry Potter, the boy who lived, he's finally on the train. Go see. I heard someone from the Malfoys is hassling him. Wizette moved into the aisle and found it clogged with students shoving to be first. It's like chasing a celebrity, he muttered. Night fell as the Hogwarts Express slowed to a stop at a rough little platform. There were no torches, only the cold wind that made noses red and people sneeze as they unloaded. Cho Chang waved. Goodbye for now. New students, follow tradition. You don't go in the main doors. Tradition? The sorting ceremony? Wizette asked. No, Cho laughed and warmed her hands on her breath. We enter the castle the same way the four founders did. It's a rough path. A booming voice cut through the bustle. First years over here. Watch your step. Mind the path. Wizette craned his neck and made out a huge lantern bobbing in the darkness. It belonged to Hagrid. Hey, Wizette, found you. Hagrid spotted him, waving a hand the size of a small ship's wheel. He elbowed through the crowd and bent to scoop Wizette up like a kid. Good to see you. How've you been? The Daily Prophet's been quiet lately. Well, quieter. All anyone talks about is Harry. After all, Harry's arrived, Hagrid went on cheerfully. He's famous in the wizarding world. I'll introduce you. Harry, where are you? Because of Hagrid's height, he could pluck people out of the crowd like prizes. He lifted a boy with unruly black hair and bright green eyes, Harry Potter. Not far behind squeezed a familiar freckled face. We met before, on the flu, Ron said, waving. Remember me? Wizette nodded. Of course, nice to see you again, Ron pointed. This is Wizette. You told me about him on the train. Harry's face lit up. So it was you. Hagrid kept talking about you when he took me to Diagon Alley, said you helped him a lot. Wizette shrugged. It was nothing. I was kind of forced into it. That wasn't nothing, Hagrid interrupted, booming. You didn't only help me, you helped Headmaster Dumbledore. Wizette blinked. Headmaster Dumbledore? He hadn't expected Hagrid to say that. Hagrid flushed and changed the subject clumsily. Come on, there's a bit of a walk to the castle. The walk across the grounds lived up to Cho Chang's warning. The path was rocky and uneven, easy to trip in the dark, and twice Hagrid had to bend down and pick up a tumbler or two. The younger children gaped at his size and didn't cry, though some had watery eyes. Ron, who had elbowed his way to the front, breathed a little smugly. Good thing I pushed forward. There'll be plenty of challenges. What challenges? Harry asked. Ron lowered his voice. Fred says the sorting is terrifying. We might even have to fight giants. Giants? Harry craned up at Hagrid. Bigger than you? Ron shook his head. No idea, but supposedly bigger than Hagrid. Hermione spoke up crisply. True giants are at least 20 feet tall. It's ridiculous to call anything smaller a giant. Ron and Harry went quiet. Then, just as Hermione was about to continue, a deep, delighted bellow came from Hagrid. Just a bit further. Turn the corner, and there's Hogwarts. They rounded the bend, and the lake opened before them like a sheet of black glass. On the far shore, a great castle rose, its spires and towers cutting a jagged silhouette against the night. Stonework, countless glowing windows, warm points of light like constellations, made the place look older and grander than any building Wizette had seen on television. Up close, something else showed. A faint silver-blue radiance clung to the castle, an ancient, humming magic that made him feel almost dizzy with the urge to reach for it. Images and scraps of information flooded his mind until he activated Guardian Meditation and forced them back. As the rush faded, a new thing happened. An entry in his mental notepad opened itself, titled The Practical Guide to Wizarding Duels, and a misty map of Hogwarts materialized. The castle and the lake were only faint outlines. The only clear path was the rough route they had just taken from the station. To lift the rest of the fog, the map implied he would have to explore Hogwarts itself. Wizette smiled despite the chill. Future life here would not be dull. Hagrid pointed at a line of small boats bobbing at the water's edge. Get in, 4 to a boat. We cross by water, nice and steady. Wizette found himself in a boat with Hermione, Ron, and Harry. At Hagrid's command, the boats glided across, as if pulled by an unseen current. A moment later, a shriek broke the quiet. Trevor, don't run! Neville's voice squealed. His pet toad had wriggled free and leapt toward the lake. Ron glanced down at his rat, Scabbers, and muttered, At least Scabbers wouldn't be that foolish. Wizette drew his wand quickly. Accio, Trevor! Guardian Meditation sharpened his concentration, and his spellwork was clean and fast. As Trevor hit the water, a flicker of magic caught him and yanked him back out, tumbling through the air in a wet, splashing arc before dropping into Neville's awaiting hands. Everyone in the boat stared. What kind of magic was that? Ron's eyes were wide as saucers. Summoning charm, Hermione blurted out. Didn't I tell you before? Remember when you tried to turn Scabbers yellow? That spell was dodgy, I mean it. Ron sounded unusually flat. Can we not talk about that? Harry was about to say something, but seeing Ron's reaction, he closed his mouth. Hermione fell silent too, head bowed and suddenly listless. Vizette sat with his eyes half closed, maintaining guardian meditation, perfectly at ease as the boat cut across the black lake. A gentle breeze ruffled the surface. The moon hung like a curved blade in the sky and spilled silver light across the ripples, turning the water into something like a shimmering oil painting. Creatures blinked up at them from the depths. Unnoticed, the little boat slipped through a curtain of ivy and eased to the shore. Hagrid was waiting with a lantern and led them through a dark tunnel to a place that looked like a boathouse. Here the signs of excavation began to show. They followed a pebble-paved path, climbed a long flight of stone steps, and at last entered a wide courtyard and the gates of Hogwarts. Even after the climb left them breathless, the children's chatter and laughter returned. Thump, 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 Hagrid's fist, large as a sandbag, pounded the oak door. It opened slowly, and Professor McGonagall stood framed in the doorway. Her tall, severe figure instantly quieted the group. Hagrid announced, "Professor McGonagall, I've brought the first years." "Thank you, Hagrid." McGonagall nodded and swept her gaze over the children. "Follow me. The welcome feast will begin shortly." Inside the castle, the staircases were marble and grand. They climbed one and turned into a corridor, entering a small room with a blazing fire. The warmth chased the chill from their bones. At the far end, another door stood slightly ajar, with muffled sounds drifting through the gap. "Welcome to Hogwarts," Professor McGonagall said, planting herself in front of the door. "Before you enter the Great Hall, you must undergo the sorting ceremony. Your house will be your home at Hogwarts. You will study and live with your housemates and spend your free time in the same common rooms. This ceremony is very important. It determines your house affiliation. After the ceremony, you will become a member of Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, or Slytherin. Each house has a glorious past and has nurtured countless excellent witches and wizards. Your behavior and work during the year contribute to the awarding of the House Cup. This is the highest honor in the school. No matter where you are sorted, I hope you will bring honor to your house." She straightened, every inch the authoritative head of house. "Please wait here a moment. The sorting ceremony will begin in a few minutes. The entire school, staff and students will attend. Take this time to compose yourselves and to present your best demeanor." She turned to open the door, then looked back. "I will come to fetch you when the stage is ready. Remain quiet and compose yourselves." Her tone, her manner, everything drained the laughter from the room and replaced it with a tangible nervousness. The children looked at each other, but found only mirrored worry. "We might have to fight giants or dragons," Ron declared in a voice far too firm for the occasion. "I didn't believe Fred and George before, but now, maybe they were telling the truth." "Vizette, aren't you nervous?" Harry fogged his glasses with a breath and clumsily wiped them. "The sorting ceremony is about to happen." "Not nervous." Vizette shook his head. "Just keep a normal mindset. That's a form of preparation." Guardian meditation had tuned Vizette to small shifts in mood. He thought he caught the hint of amusement under McGonagall's sternness. Between that and what Cho Chang had said earlier, the sorting ceremony didn't feel ominous to him. Vizette's calm seemed to rub off on those nearby. He used the few minutes to walk the room and take it in. Suddenly a thought struck him. He released his magic eye and let it drink in the ancient magic power lingering there. The power condensed into a silver-blue, ink-like fluid and stored itself in his notebook. One room's worth wasn't enough to turn a page in the book. That had been expected. A small bright spot did appear on the map in his notebook, however, proof that continued exploration of the castle would yield more. A shriek broke the moment. "Ghosts! The walls are haunted!" They all turned. The portraits and wall ghosts were not looking at the children so much as arguing among themselves. A monk-like specter drifted down, and the room erupted again. "You can call me the Fat Friar," the ghost said, cheerfully bobbing. "I'm from Hufflepuff, and I hope you lot get put there. Very good people, Hufflepuff." McGonagall's timing could hardly have been better. She reappeared at the door just then. "Line up in single file and follow me. The sorting ceremony is about to begin." The great hall was thick with magical atmosphere. The high dome overhead seemed transparent and showed a brilliant starry sky. 1,000 candles floated in midair beneath it, burning cleanly without dripping wax or smoke, a small miracle of enchantment. Hermione, always one to calm herself with facts, began reciting, "The ceiling is enchanted, it shows the sky outside, and it changes with the weather. From Hogwarts, a history." McGonagall brought forward a four-legged stool and set the pointy sorting hat on it. The hat looked tired and mended in places, slouched atop the stool like something that had seen better days. "Shall we try a repairing charm on it?" Vizette half joked, but Hermione's voice rose in a small panic. "I haven't practiced that magic," she protested as if on the verge of tears. "What if?" The sorting hat split open on its own, and a thin, sawtooth tune spilled out. The song was rough on the ears, but Vizette caught the meaning beneath the odd melody. The hat would decide where each student belonged. Gryffindor required courage, Hufflepuff prized hard work, loyalty, and fair play. Ravenclaw awarded wit and learning, Slytherin favored ambition and resourcefulness. When the song ended, Professor McGonagall unrolled a parchment scroll. "When I call your name, please come and sit on the stool and put on the sorting hat. Hannah Abbott." Chapter 26, Problem Students in the Branch. The girl with 2 golden braids ran forward, her cheeks flushed, slipped the sorting hat onto her head and pulled the brim down so it covered her eyes. Vizette could see why the hat was full of patches. It wasn't to boast of age, but because the thing had clearly been repaired many times. The hat opened its mouth and called, "Hufflepuff." Cheers erupted from the long table to the right. The applause was particularly enthusiastic. The ghost who had spoken earlier floated out and waved its hands in the air in congratulations. Hannah Abbott pulled the hat off and let out a long breath, looking almost dazed as she stumbled toward the applauding table. "It was that simple," Ron muttered, outraged and glancing over his shoulder. "George is making faces at me. He's doing it on purpose." "Susan Bones" came next. "Hufflepuff." The children relaxed noticeably, many eager to try the hat themselves. The sorting order, determined by the first letters of their surnames, made some fidget impatiently. The hat's decisions came at wildly different speeds. Some barely put it on before it shrieked out a house, while others had to endure long silences. Hermione sat on the stool for several minutes before the sorting hat finally called, reluctantly, "Gryffindor." "Oh," Ron groaned. Neville sat even longer, and then the hat firmly declared, "Gryffindor. Luna Lovegood." Vizette stepped forward calmly and set the sorting hat on his head. With guardian meditation, he could feel countless gazes pressed upon him. 2 girls, Cho Chang and Penelope, at the Ravenclaw table watched him with interest. Professor McGonagall leaned forward in her seat, clearly anticipating the result. Behind her, 2 very different attentions made themselves known. One familiar, warm, and approving, Dumbledore's, and another cold and covetous, like a thief staring at treasure. That second look lasted only a handful of seconds before vanishing. For a moment, Vizette worried it might have been only his imagination. "How long does it take?" he thought. More than 5 minutes passed, and the hat still hadn't called a house. "This great hall is beautiful, I know that, of course," a subtle voice said inside his head, omnipresent like surround sound. "Although you are a new student, so many are watching you. It's fascinating." The voice took on a tinge of helplessness. "But I must say, you ought to consider your own path. You are too special. I don't know where to put you." "You're the sorting hat?" Vizette asked under his breath. "Oh, yes," the hat replied a bit excitedly. "I can only follow your thoughts and feelings and sense the gazes in this hall." Vizette's heart stirred with understanding. His guardian meditation explained the hat's confusion. Curious about its methods, he asked, "How do you sort students?" "A very polite question," the hat answered. "Have you heard of legilimency? If not, it's difficult to explain. After all, I am just a hat." Wizette remembered a mention of legilimency from some book he'd read. You can read my mind? Something like that. The Sorting Hat sounded surprised. If you want to know more, the Hogwarts library is full of ancient magic. But duty calls, the Hat continued. Since you are so special, why not decide for yourself? Wizette didn't hesitate. Put me in Ravenclaw. You love knowledge, don't you? The Hat's tone brightened. Powerful wizards delight in exploration, in swimming through the ocean of knowledge. Hogwarts Library welcomes you, child. So, the Hat opened its mouth wider and pronounced, Ravenclaw. Professor McGonagall and Dumbledore exchanged glances and shook their heads slightly, a mix of amusement and puzzlement on their faces. The Ravenclaw table erupted into enthusiastic applause, louder than most. Wizette found an empty place and sat down. Despite the cheering, his expression stayed composed, though his ears flushed crimson. Cho flashed him a brilliant smile. Congratulations, you're a sorting conundrum. A sorting conundrum? Is that good? Wizette asked. Of course, Cho explained. It's an old term. Only students whose sorting takes more than 5 minutes are called that. You know the Hat's speed. When it's torn between houses, it means the student has many different qualities. Wizette realized his long concentration during the ceremony, his guardian meditation, was what had made the Hat hesitate and allowed him to choose. Penelope added, As far as I know, only 2 sorting conundrums have appeared this century, and both ended up in Gryffindor. Maybe you need very unusual traits to be one. Professor McGonagall was once a sorting conundrum, and she was a Gryffindor. The other one was Peter Pettigrew, but he was Gryffindor too. Penelope's voice lowered conspiratorially. When You-Know-Who fell, he confronted one of You-Know-Who's followers, Sirius, and paid for it with his life. The Ministry awarded him a first-class Order of Merlin in his memory. Across the hall, Gryffindor grew rowdy, shouting, We have Potter, and then teasingly, We have Wizette. Sorting conundrums are rare, Cho laughed. You're a Ravenclaw sorting conundrum. Wizette remembered Professor McGonagall's talk of the House Cup and couldn't help but comment, It sounds like the House Cup competition is intense. It is, Penelope agreed. It's the school's highest honor, the House's recognition. At last, the sorting ceremony wound down. Ron was finally placed in Gryffindor. Professor McGonagall collected the stool and the hat, and Dumbledore stepped forward and stood before a statue of an owl. The statue spread its wings and transformed into a small podium, amplifying Dumbledore's voice so every corner of the hall heard him perfectly. The new school year begins tonight. Welcome back to Hogwarts. Before the feast begins, I'll say a few brief words. He paused, and Wizette, remembering every principal's tendency to promise brevity before launching into a long speech, braced himself. That is nitwit, blubber, oddment, tweak. Now, enjoy the feast. Thank you. Before anyone could react, a rich aroma rolled over the tables. Amid enthusiastic applause, platters and bowls appeared and the long tables filled with food. Roast beef and pork, lamb and potatoes, roasted chicken, sausages and chips. The mountain of dishes steamed invitingly. Penelope scooped a spoonful of mashed potatoes and grinned. Dumbledore is something else, she said. It'd be great if he were a Ravenclaw. 27. How to open Ravenclaw. The start of term feast at Hogwarts was, at the very least, exceptional. The meats were cooked to perfection, not just tender and juicy, but richly flavored. A careful hand with black pepper and rosemary had brought out their full taste. The gravies, sauces, and ketchups were equally well made. A dab on a sausage or potato transformed the bite. Wizette took another lamb chop, drizzled a spoonful of gravy over it, and listened as the hall grew louder with conversation. The older students chatted and laughed, trading gossip about current events, magical celebrities, and spellcasting tips, and speculating about their professors. Even though Wizette hadn't yet studied magic in any depth, he learned a lot just by listening. Professor McGonagall, he heard, had a reputation for responsibility and strictness, especially with her own house. As head of Gryffindor, she did not hesitate to dock points. Professor Snape, potion master and head of Slytherin, was the opposite. Indulgent with his own house, but notoriously harsh with others, particularly Gryffindor. It was why Gryffindor's house points often lagged behind. Professor Flitwick, head of Ravenclaw and charms teacher, was beloved for making his classes engaging. Professor Sprout, kind, middle-aged, and always tending to her magical plants, was also well regarded. After the main course, dessert appeared in an array of pies, sponges, puddings, jellies, and ice cream. The syrups on the pastries were heavy and overwhelmingly sweet, so Wizard only took a small scoop of ice cream, savoring its milky richness. Dessert lifted the mood, and the older students moved on to tales of their summers and the recent Gringotts incident. "Have you heard about Gringotts?" one student asked. "It's been front-page news for weeks. Whoever tried to rob an underground vault, especially a high-security one, must be mad," another scoffed. "Maybe it was the goblins themselves, putting on a show for the wealthy purebloods," someone else suggested. "Or another goblin uprising," a fourth offered. "I saw some of their old facilities at the mine. Their smelting techniques are fascinating." When plates were cleared, Dumbledore rose and walked back to the owl lectern. "Now that everyone has eaten their fill, perhaps you'll indulge an old man in a few more words." Light laughter followed as he smiled. "First, I'd like to introduce your new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, Quirrell." Quirrell stood, his head wrapped in a thick purple turban and his robes cut in an exotic, vaguely Indian style. He waved awkwardly and stammered in a thin, nervous voice. "Hello, everyone. I'm Quirrell. Very happy to be teaching Defense Against the Dark Arts." "Thank you, Professor Quirrell," Dumbledore said, motioning for him to sit. "And now some perennial reminders." He ran through the usual rules. First years, he warned, must never enter the Forbidden Forest unless absolutely confident one side of the grounds was simply too dangerous. Mr. Filch had booklets detailing school rules and point deductions. Quidditch tryouts would be held next week. Check your common room notice boards for times. Then Dumbledore grew more serious. "There is one more thing, and it is the most important. Do not, under any circumstances, go near the corridor on the right side of the 4th floor. If you wish to avoid grave danger and a terrible death, remember that." A hush fell over the hall before his smile returned. He waved his wand. "Before you return to your common rooms, let us sing the school song together." With a bang, a long golden ribbon flew from the tip of his wand and unfurled into lines of lyrics that hovered in the air like a slithering serpent. Dumbledore conducted as if leading an orchestra. "Any tune you like." "Ready, sing." Gryffindor sang loudest, followed by Hufflepuff. Ravenclaw and Slytherin mostly mouthed the words. Few actually sang. The awkward song ended, the prefects fell into line, and the students filed out of the great hall toward their common rooms. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The moving staircases were in motion ahead of them. They shifted, lengthened, and shortened, sometimes stopping before a door, sometimes pressing against a wall. Penelope led the way, pointing with pride. "The moving staircases were designed by our founder, Rowena Ravenclaw," she said. "A school of magic can't have ordinary steps. Moving staircases should be as free as a wizard." She ushered them onto the staircases and continued to introduce their house. "Ravenclaw is as free as the sky. Our common room sits high in the tower. Our colors, bronze and blue, symbolize the eagle and the sky. We have a house library, not on the scale of the school library, of course, but close enough. When we read here, we have more freedom." The climb to the Ravenclaw Tower was long and took them across many moving stairs. Some of the new students grew drowsy and nodded off while walking. Wizette stayed alert, fascinated by the living portraits, the suits of armor, and everything else that smelled of magic. Cho Chang smiled at him. "You're a good fit for Ravenclaw. You're not drifting off at all." Wizette grinned. "This place is too interesting to sleep. I just hope I can get some sleep tonight." "Classes start tomorrow," Cho reminded him. "It's best to be up early and make a good impression on the professors." At last, they reached the tower. A bronze door stood before them, topped with a statue of an eagle with folded wings, so lifelike it seemed it might take flight. Penelope stepped forward. The bronze ring beneath the eagle quivered, and a pleasant female voice came from it. "I am here, yet I know nothing. Abandon me, and I shall surely perish." Penelope turned to Wizette and the others. "Ravenclaw is different from the other houses. We don't use a password. You must answer a riddle to enter. Then, today's question isn't too difficult. Let's have a new student try. Remember, the answer isn't always one single word. Anything that makes sense will do." 28, Ravenclaw Common Room. Wizette read the riddle aloud. "I am here, yet I know nothing. If I abandon it, I will surely die." "Is it air?" It's everywhere and hard to detect, and if you can't breathe, you'll die, someone answered. The eagle statue seemed to come alive, spreading its bronzed wings. The heavy door slowly opened, revealing a marble spiral staircase within. Perfect answer, and a very reasonable explanation. Penelope applauded. This is our way of life. Welcome to Ravenclaw. They climbed the marble spiral. At the top, they entered an enormous, circular common room flooded with light. The dome was painted with a starry sky, matching clear crystals that drifted in midair. Snow-white marble walls, sea-blue carpets and draperies, and rustic bronze fittings established a calm, scholarly atmosphere. Desks, benches, and armchairs were arranged in little clusters. Bookshelves sat in wall niches, piled with thick volumes, giving the place the feel of a literary salon. Arched windows punctured the walls. The starlight outside was clear and sharp, like tiny lanterns. Older students settled into corners, reading or staring up at the floating crystals as if clearing their minds. New students crowded the windows to admire the brilliant night sky. Penelope clapped to get their attention. Professor McGonagall told you the house is your home. You'll be here for 7 school years. But the priority now is to get you to your dormitory. I noticed a few of you nodding off earlier. You must be exhausted after that journey, right? She led the girls across the room toward the girls' dormitory. On the opposite side stood a tall statue nearly reaching the dome. A woman in flowing robes and a magnificent crown, her hair trailing nearly to the floor. The plaque read, Rowena Ravenclaw, her extraordinary intelligence a treasure to humankind. While the new girls began to drift towards sleep, Penelope returned and led the boys to their dormitory. She paused, pointing at a double door. This is the washroom. If you'd like to freshen up later, come here. Although the Ravenclaw common room occupied only one tower, it was surprisingly spacious, with at least 3 spiral staircases and several dormitory entrances. This is your dormitory. I won't go in. By the way, the stairs to the girls' dorm have a charm. If someone of the opposite sex attempts to enter, those stairs turn into slick slides oiled like banisters. A new student raised a hand. Then why can you go in? Is that a prefect privilege? Of course not. Prefect status doesn't include that. Penelope shook her head. The most reasonable explanation is that the founders thought girls were more reliable than boys. The dormitory itself was generous. Each student had a private 4-poster bed and wardrobe, a desk, and a chair. The beds were copper and draped with deep blue curtains embroidered with bronze eagles. Thick blue carpet softened each step. True to what they'd heard on the train, their luggage had already been delivered. Everything looked as if a little house elf had arranged it personally. Suitcases were stacked neatly, bedding and pillows laid out, and the air smelled faintly of sunlight. Most of the new students were too tired even to introduce themselves. They simply collapsed into bed and fell asleep. Coo, coo, coo! Saul the owl prodded at his perch, claws skittering across the stand as if eager for something. Were you feeling cramped? Vizette smiled and opened the cage. Saul flew straight to a suitcase and pecked at it, thumping insistently. Don't wake them. Vizette scooped Saul up and opened his own trunk to pull out a thick cloth bag, the snacks he'd bought from the sales witch. Are you sure you can manage on your own? Or should I find the owlery and ask for help? Saul let out a long, confident coo and preened, striking an air of self-assurance. Vizette sat at his desk, spread a sheet of parchment, and stared at it. He thought and thought, fingers stained with ink, until the quill tip dried without a single word put down. He had never really written a letter before. For a moment, he didn't know how to begin. Even with the aid of guardian meditation, his thoughts felt muddled. Where should he start? King's Cross? Crossing the lake to the castle? Saul tapped his chest with his beak as if to say, that's a good place. You seem to have inherited Luna's way about things, Vizette murmured. He dipped the quill again and hesitated. When he put pen to paper at last, the ink bloomed into a dark stain as the words began to take shape. Snape's face was taut. He knocked once, then didn't wait for an answer, pushing open the door to the headmaster's office. A boy who lived, an Obscurial, a young Cerberus. Hogwarts is livelier than ever this year, isn't it, headmaster? Dumbledore set the sorting hat on the desk and nodded. Indeed, very lively. Snape gave 2 cold, sarcastic snorts. I never expected Hogwarts to become so safe while I was away. He emphasized the word, slow as a knife. How exactly do you plan to protect Harry Potter? Is avoiding fulfillment of the prophecy the only victory you accept? Would you be satisfied if someone liable to lose control and turn into an Obscurus were admitted to be Harry's classmate? Snape demanded. Severus, calm down. Have some tea. Dumbledore leaned back, waved, and a teapot floated toward them. My suggestion is you read The Quibbler. Snape's mouth twitched. The Quibbler? It's taken to printing about Obscuruses and how to deal with Obscurials. Those editions seem popular. Dumbledore set the teacups down. Indeed, and the editor of The Quibbler is Xenophilius Lovegood. That Obscurial shares that surname. Snape's expression sharpened. You mean Xenophilius approves of this? Boy? Yes. Dumbledore poured tea. Xenophilius's interest suggests he approves of Vizette, and I've noticed something else. Snape glanced at the teacup, waiting. Is it about that Obscurial? The Sorting Hat told me. Dumbledore tapped the table. Do you want to explain further? Snape sat, folding his hands. That child is not simple, he began. The Sorting Hat suddenly piped up from the table. I seem to be able to see what he's thinking, but then again, I can't, it said in its warped, familiar voice. It's a strange feeling. I find him remarkably approachable. Not that he's some ancient relic. No, I can see you through him, from his own perspective. This is fascinating. I love this feeling. I love this child. The hat's tone carried an odd, affectionate enthusiasm. Snape frowned, brows knitting into a worried crease. Are you saying 29, Demon King, Revolutionary, Rising Star, and Prophecy? Snape picked up his teacup and took a sip. Occlumency? This is the Sorting Hat. Dumbledore added sugar to his cup, cube after cube. For Vizette, occlumency is very important. Being able to control one's emotions at will, to unleash and retract extreme feelings freely. If you can manage that, even an Obscurus rampage becomes controllable, Snape began. Before Dumbledore could finish, Snape cut him off. Don't ask me. I didn't come to ask you to teach it. Dumbledore seemed to have expected this objection. He shook his head and smiled. I have a more suitable candidate. Who is this intruder? Snape's tone sharpened. What's behind the corridor on the right of the 4th floor? Could it be the Dark Lord has returned? It isn't certain yet. Dumbledore sighed lightly. I've heard rumors and found a few clues, but I still need proof. Gather proof? Snape's eyes flickered. He seemed to be putting pieces together. Is it connected to the thief who broke into Gringotts? What was in the vault? An alchemical product powerful enough to draw Lord Voldemort, something he would risk everything for. It was worth the commotion. The Philosopher's Stone, only that could pull the Dark Lord's attention. Severus, you are alarmingly perceptive, which makes it hard for me to tell you anything more. Dumbledore's smile softened, but his eyes twitched with amusement. That said, I must remind you, Hogwarts must remain safe. We keep it safe together, Snape said. Your plan? Precisely. We keep it safe together. Dumbledore returned the smile. It had the faint edge of a predator pleased with a catch. Aside from you, I will ask the other professors to help shore up our defenses. Perhaps I came at the wrong time. Snape's face darkened. Knocking on this door felt like a mistake. You came at exactly the right time. Dumbledore's eyes narrowed. Even if you hadn't sought me out, I would have come to you and made my request. Snape's wariness didn't fade. You seem to be holding something back. What else are you planning? Has the intruder been identified? Not yet. There will be a moment when he reveals himself. Dumbledore shook his head. It's late. The new term has started. We must all do our part. Late that night, a female portrait in the headmaster's office suddenly spoke. As you expected, someone did go to that room. Dumbledore, still at his desk, looked up. Madam Wilkins. Who was it? It was Quirrell. He didn't force the door. He probed it with magic. As one would expect from a Ravenclaw, clever. Dumbledore's praise was polite, but the disappointment under it was unmistakable. This isn't his usual behavior. Things are worsening. That last candidate can be confirmed. He picked up his quill and wrote the final name on the list. The paper already carried other names, Minerva McGonagall, Severus Snape, and Rubeus Hagrid, now joined by Quirrell. Early the next morning, the first shaft of sunlight slipped into the dormitory. Vizette blinked awake to the chorus of snoring and sleep talk around him. His head felt empty, as if he had absorbed too much and retained none. He counted silently. 1, 2, 3. Yesterday I kept guardian meditation for at least 5 hours. It was the longest he had ever maintained it. The meditation had given him a night rich with magic. He'd felt everything fully. Guardian meditation restrained emotions internally, keeping the Obscurus contained at the core. Outwardly, it sharpened perception and could speed casting, a blend of offense and defense. But it couldn't be maintained indefinitely. He'd need to watch the duration he used it. A parchment lay on his desk with a grid of his timetable. Both morning classes were potions. In the afternoon lay history of magic. Vizette lingered in the dormitory, absorbing the ancient magic that lingered there, then went to wash. Afterward, he headed to the common room to review his textbooks, a habit from his previous life. It wasn't yet 7, but the common room was already busy. Students sat with books of all kinds. "Morning, sleep well?" Cho Chang called softly from a corner. "Getting used to things?" "Very well," Vizette nodded. "I'm looking forward to potions and history of magic. Both sound interesting." "You may want to dampen that enthusiasm," Cho laughed. "Be prepared. Professor Snape will appear silently behind you. Don't be surprised. As for history of magic, if you see people nodding off, that's normal." "Why is that?" "Professor Binns is the oldest teacher here. He's a ghost, and the only person who's ever taught history of magic. He drones on in a monotone, and the classroom is unusually comfortable. Even I fall asleep sometimes." Vizette smiled faintly. "That sounds oddly magical." He sat until his stomach growled and then went for breakfast. Not far out of the common room, a sudden belch announced the presence of someone who smelled strongly of alcohol. A gaunt woman stood before him, thin as bamboo, wearing thick black-rimmed glasses that magnified wide, watery eyes. Beads and chains draped her neck, bracelets and rings jangled on her bony arms, a fortune-teller's persona, if judged by appearances alone. It was barely dawn, and the corridor should have been empty. She had simply appeared. Vizette rose politely. "Excuse me, madam. I didn't see you." "Hick," she belched, and a sour reek of drink spread around them. "It's all right. Fate brought us together." Her speech was slurred. "I saw it in my crystal ball. Knew I'd meet someone this morning." Vizette hesitated. He didn't know why such a woman was here. "If you're all right, I'll leave you to your business." He meant to move on. Her eyes bulged. Both pupils darted wildly. Her mouth opened, as if on the verge of a fit. Before he could react, she snapped forward with surprising speed, spider-like fingers clamping on his arm. Her voice grated as she spoke, every word jagged and urgent. "The Dark Lord, clad in the hero's armor, who defeated the revolutionaries, he found a new star. This new star reminds him of the past. He will pass on armor and sword. The former Dark Lord will return, but the disguised Dark Lord must defeat the former Dark Lord. The new star gives the disguised Dark Lord a reason to break his chains. Is it the former Dark Lord who revives old fears, or the disguised Dark Lord who brings fresh disaster? The future is clouded, yet the rising of the new star will light the path ahead." Footsteps came from the far end of the corridor. "George, did you hear that?" "Wouldn't we know if we went to look? Probably Ravenclaw students up early, poring over ancient books." The footsteps drew nearer. Vizette looked up and saw 2 familiar faces, Fred and George Weasley. Fred grinned. "Vizette, only the first day and you've already taken to Ravenclaw's finest tradition, getting up at the crack of dawn." "He didn't exactly wake up on purpose," George said, pretending to scowl. "Professor Trelawney must have had the urge to test out the most primitive form of divination." "Exactly," Fred nodded, as if whatever George said made perfect sense. "Pick a random new student, draw blood, and voila, insight into fate." Vizette didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The twins' facility for nonsense was alarming. Is she really a professor at Hogwarts? Why is she drinking so early and babbling nonsense? "Professor Trelawney, she's in charge of divination," George explained. "I think she's the great-granddaughter of some famous seer. To be honest, she's more like a dark witch." Fred agreed earnestly. "She loves death prophecies, and she rather hopes they'll come true." "Those death prophecies," George added, warming to the topic, "if you really want them fulfilled, you'll need wicked dark arts curses." Thump. Trelawney flopped and rolled, her head hitting the floor with a crisp sound. The twins stopped and admired it like fine music. "How beautiful!" they exclaimed in unison. Vizette had never met such an eccentric professor and had no idea what to do. Seeing how familiar the twins were with Trelawney, he asked, What should we do now? Fred crouched and shoved Trelawney gently. She's fainted, as befits Professor Trelawney, every move a surprise. Then he looked up at Vizette. What's your first class? Potions. Perfect, Fred said, shouldering Trelawney's limp arm. George mirrored him on the other side. Your first lesson is Snape's. Knowing the way to the hospital improves your survival odds. Remember this path to survival, George said solemnly. If Professor Snape says he's going to poison you and anything feels off, head straight to the hospital. Poisoning? Vizette's eyebrow twitched. Is that part of potions? No, the twins said together. That's just Snape's twisted sense of humor. He's useful in weird ways, George conceded. A lot of our prank ideas came from his poisons. As long as he doesn't actually poison us to death, Fred said with a look. George finished the thought. The poison will become galleons in our pockets. Vizette's curiosity bloomed. What do pranks and poison have to do with each other? You're quick on the uptake, Fred praised. You haven't seen prank items yet. That sight alone, George said, grinning, is something else. The collision of potions and creativity. Magic meets alchemy, and out come the finest prank items. They spoke with the absolute conviction of inventors. Before the twins left, Vizette released his magic eye and glanced at a nearby tapestry. The painting was animated, the figures moved. A troll in a ballet tutu brandished a wooden club at a scrawny wizard who leapt about trying to fend it off. Across from the tapestry, a thick, ancient magical power pooled in the stone, shaping the faint outline of an arched doorway. Vizette wondered if Trelawney had come from within. The wizarding world never ceased to amaze him. The school hospital sat on the castle's second floor. Before they pushed open the door, the scent of herbs drifted out. A stern voice snapped, "Trelawney, drunk again this early?" A tall, austere woman stepped out, Madame Pomfrey. Her bearing reminded Vizette a little of Professor McGonagall. Her robes were slightly medieval, full of pockets and pouches, each hinting at tools and potions. "Thank you," she said more softly as she took Trelawney's arm. "Thank you for carrying her. It's only the start of term. We can't have a drunk lying about in the corridors." Fred nudged Vizette. "This is Madame Pomfrey." Vizette watched her work. "Heal as before," she muttered, flicking her wand. A bright green light gathered on Trelawney's forehead, and the bump faded instantly. Pomfrey fished a test tube from a pocket, pried open Trelawney's mouth, and tipped the liquid in. Trelawney coughed, belching amber smoke and the sharp tang of alcohol. "Vanish!" Pomfrey said, and the unpleasant mist evaporated. "Professor Trelawney, please restrain yourself. It's unseemly for new students to see you like this." At the word new students, Trelawney reacted like a cat whose tail had been trodden on. She covered her face and darted away down the corridor so fast she might have been trying to set a record. "Cool," the twins whistled. If Trelawney had been a seeker instead of a diviner, she'd have gone far. Madame Pomfrey raised an eyebrow and turned to the twins. "And you two, what on earth have you been giving the students? Baffling brain elixir? No physical side effects, but overuse breeds dependence." "Who, us?" George pointed at his nose. "Madame Pomfrey, you know we're broke." "Exactly," Fred agreed. "At best, we can afford rosemary. How many galleons would monkey brain cost?" Vizette hurried to clarify. "I didn't take any potion. They brought Professor Trelawney to me." "Perhaps," Pomfrey said, bending to examine Vizette. "Do you feel a bit foggy? That can happen with prolonged baffling brain elixir." Vizette didn't want to reveal his guardian meditation, so he stuck to the truth he'd given. "I didn't take any elixir. Maybe I went to bed late." "Perhaps." Pomfrey didn't press. She produced a small bottle of clear, purple-tinted potion. "One drop of this will clear it." "Is that a lavender tincture?" Vizette asked. He'd read about something similar that morning. "Smart Ravenclaw," Pomfrey conceded, and she dispensed a single drop with a flick of her wand. "You still have classes. This will steady you so you won't feel drunk. Come back at noon, find a crystal to clear your mind, and you'll be fine by afternoon." With that, she swept back into the hospital. "Madame Pomfrey is brilliant," Vizette said, feeling much better already. "It's a pity she leaves the castle in the summer," Fred sighed. "We'd stay here all year if we could." "This is not your private clinic," Pomfrey called from inside. "Be careful with your magic, and stop turning this place into a playground." "Understood, Madame Pomfrey." The twins saluted exaggeratedly. "We'll remember." 31. Professor Snape's aura. Only after absorbing the ancient magic he could obtain did Vizette arrive in the Great Hall. This time, he channeled the power into his magic eye. The magic eye was still in its infancy, but it had gained a peculiar ability, making the magic circuits of enchanted objects visible. As he walked toward the Ravenclaw table, a ripple of malice rose from the Slytherin side. I heard Miss Parkinson says he's an Obscurial, an extremely dangerous person. He looks so polite and handsome, though, one voice sneered. It's all a disguise. Find a healer and get a permanent transfiguration. You can be whoever you want, another taunted. I'm not going to get hospitalized at St. Mungo's. Permanent transfiguration is too risky. If this dangerous man snaps in class, we'll all be buried with him. Why did Dumbledore let him in? He's too dangerous. He should be sent to Azkaban and given a Dementor's kiss. That's right, Azkaban's where people like him belong. The Slytherins were loud, as if the whole Great Hall should know they'd labeled him an Obscurial. Vizette smiled politely, feeling nothing stir inside. In his previous life, he'd grown up in an orphanage and was used to whispers, suspicion, and even bullying because of his odd background. He'd been mentally prepared to face rumors calmly before he ever arrived at Hogwarts. To his surprise, only the Slytherin table seemed particularly interested. The other three tables barely reacted. Their conversations mostly revolved around Harry Potter, the boy who lived. The boy with a handsome nose and long black hair sat beside Vizette. You really are eating in the Great Hall, he said. Chris told me some older Gryffindor lads took you. I almost reported it to Prefect Penelope, the other boy added. You just want to see Prefect Penelope, Chris said with a grin. Morning, a blond boy called. Why is your book so small? Is it a miniature hardcover? Morning, Anthony, Vizette answered. It's not a hardcover. I copied all the textbook content myself, and Luna helped me with the illustrations and the cover. Morning, Vizette, another brown-haired boy frowned. Luna? Is she a girl? Good morning, Terry, Vizette nodded. Yes, she's my sister. Chris Mohn, Anthony Goldstein, Michael Corner, and Terry Boot, these four were Vizette's roommates. Your sister sounds wonderful. Mine just cries all day, Terry muttered, envious. Will she be coming to Hogwarts later? Definitely, Vizette said. She'll be here next year. A sister who draws your illustrations. What a perfect life. Chris sighed with envy. His life might be perfect, but what about us? Michael groaned. The first class is potions. Snape's reputation was dreadful, and a group of first years about to begin potions were already nervous. Still, everyone carried their textbooks and made their way to the dungeon classroom. The potions classroom was distinctive, vast and gloomy, like a medieval monastery, lit only by a few torches. Before they even entered, a cold, oppressive aura washed over them. Shelves lined the walls, tall and packed with glass jars that gave off odd smells. Under the flickering torchlight, it was hard to see what was inside. Terry peered in and jumped back 2 steps. Hiss! Are these animal specimens? They're all so strange. They're specimens of fantastic beasts, Vizette said, leaning in to identify them. That transparent, furry thing should be a demiguise, and the serpent with a bird-like head is an occamy. Luna loved fantastic beasts and where to find them. It was the first textbook he'd read thoroughly, and the specimens were well preserved, so he could easily name them. His knowledge surprised his roommates. No wonder the Sorting Hat had trouble, Terry exclaimed. You know so much. I read Fantastic Beasts twice, Vizette said. It's not just that, Chris teased. You said you copied your textbook, right? Michael scratched his head. Really? How come I didn't notice? Chris smirked. Your head's full of lovely Prefect Penelope. I'd be surprised if you noticed anything else. The long tables were scarred with burn marks and corrosion. Ravenclaws arrived early, but with Snape's reputation, none sat near the podium. Vizette, aren't you going to sit further back? Terry asked. Vizette shook his head. The lighting is poor. It's safer to sit near the front where I can see better. That's impressive, Anthony said. No wonder you know so much already this term. Indeed, Michael added. Facing Professor Snape takes not just knowledge, but courage. Vizette felt a little exasperated. It's not bravery, it's just easier to study up front. Besides, none of you have even had a class with Snape yet. Why are you already afraid? Potions was combined with Hufflepuff, and the classroom grew crowded. Still, everyone picked seats as far from the podium as possible. 5 minutes before class, the seat next to Vizette was still empty. Just then a girl with 2 golden braids rushed in. All the seats near the podium were taken, so she had no choice but to sit beside Vizette. It was Hannah Abbott, who had been sorted first. She wiped sweat from her brow, frantically arranged her textbook, and breathed a relieved sigh. Snape entered as the bell rang, his black robes flowing like a great bat. He stood at the podium, looking down, and glanced at Hannah, who was still flushed. "Hufflepuff," he said coldly, "it seems you only fail to be punctual when you're in the Great Hall, do you?" Hannah didn't answer. She bowed her head and trembled. "Congratulations, Hufflepuff. 1 point deducted," Snape said, his voice cutting. Hannah's face went crimson, and she looked as though she might cry. The room fell silent, as if frozen. "Now for roll call," Snape continued, his tone clipped. "Hannah Abbott." Here," she stammered. The roll call was brisk. Every name was answered immediately. "Good. Only one fool today," Snape muttered as he finished, and for the first time, his voice softened a little. "As beginners, if you haven't even learned a sense of time, my advice is to leave now to avoid injuring yourselves or others. Potions is a precise and exacting art. Within a single steaming cauldron lies the potential for both destruction and creation. I do not expect you to comprehend the true nature of potions yet, or the things potions can grant you. You simply need to obey me completely, to follow each instruction precisely, and wealth, status, or honor will become possible." The students were visibly intimidated. Snape ruled this room like a sovereign in his palace. After his speech, he didn't immediately begin teaching. Instead, he glanced sharply at Vizette. "Mr. Lovegood, do you not have a textbook? Why are you bringing a children's picture book to potions? This is not art." Michael Corner is a rather interesting character in the Harry Potter series. He once dated Ginny Weasley and became her boyfriend, but after she broke up with him, he began dating Cho Chang in the same school year. He's basically shown to be attracted to looks and changes partners quickly. All of this is recorded in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. You can check it out if you're interested. 32. How to use the magic eye. Vizette stood and explained plainly, "Professor Snape, my scholarship is only 30 galleons. If I use it to buy new books, I won't have enough left for the supplies on the list, so I copied all the textbooks," he added, touching, like some trite inspirational tale. Snape's face was expressionless, his voice dragged out. "Since you can make your own textbooks." He left the sentence unfinished. "You must know a lot about the contents then. What materials are needed for the pimple cure potion? What symptoms does it treat?" At once the other students snapped their books open. Before they could even find the pimple cure potion page, Vizette spoke clearly. "Half a cauldron of water, 4 finely ground snake fangs, 3 horned slugs to be steamed, 2 measures of dried fluxweed, and 1 porcupine quill." The pimple cure potion mainly treats common pustules, measles, pimples, and it also works well on certain lymphatic tuberculosis symptoms. As long as it's not magical damage, it's almost a miracle cure. Before adding the porcupine quill, if the boiling temperature is just right, pink smoke will rise from the cauldron. The purer the pink smoke, the more skilled the potion maker is. Snape pursed his lips and swept a cold gaze across the classroom. "Why aren't you starting to prepare the materials? Are you waiting for me to serve you?" Everyone, except Vizette, shuddered and fumbled to take out the listed ingredients in the proper amounts. Snape didn't stand idle. He flicked his wand and various materials flew onto the work tables, and he wrote key points on the blackboard. Grind the snake fangs as finely as possible. Frequently lift the lid to observe the steamed horned slugs. It's best if you can see black beneath the translucent skin. Boil until bubbling and stir 5 times clockwise. Remove from the heat and add the porcupine quill. Although the method for making the pimple cure potion wasn't difficult, preparing the materials took a long time, and every operation required meticulous care. Even without counting prep time, they would have to boil for at least half an hour to complete the potion. With the tight schedule, they also had to record the time spent on each step and endure Snape's constant patrols. Snape moved like a gust of wind. His robes billowing, a ghostly figure drifting through the classroom. His presence made nearly everyone feel chilled. Facing the slimy slugs, Hannah clutched the tweezers, but dared not move, her body trembling. Wizette noticed and pushed the snake fangs toward her. You handle this, okay? No need to rush. There's plenty of time. Hannah nodded gratefully and concentrated on grinding the snake fangs. Wizette picked up 6 slugs with tweezers and placed them in the steamer. Under the high heat, the slugs' mucus congealed and their bodies contracted. He cast his magic eye and saw that the slugs inside were changing. Their loose magic circuits were tightening, and a regular symbol was beginning to form. So that's why the slugs must be steamed, Wizette thought, keeping the lid closed and watching the symbol develop through his magic eye. Why aren't you opening the lid? Snape appeared behind him, his voice cold. Or are you planning to steam the slugs for exactly 10 minutes because the book says so? Hannah's hand trembled, almost smashing the mortar. The others held their breath, barely daring to move. Of course not, Professor Snape, Wizette said without looking up, focused on the slug's changing magic circuit. If you open the lid too often, it will affect the final product. Very well said. Snape's lips tightened. He stood behind Wizette, occasionally glancing at the timer beside him. At exactly 7 minutes, Wizette used the tweezers to remove 2 of the slugs, quickly replaced the lid, and recorded the time. Snape narrowed his eyes. The 2 slugs were translucent with deep black beneath their skins. His face twitched, but he remained silent, arms folded. At 7 minutes and 40 seconds, Wizette opened the lid again, took out the remaining slugs, and recorded the time. All 6 horned slugs were consistent in shape and size after steaming, their appearance identical, excellent quality. Not bad, Snape said, giving Wizette a long look before resuming his rounds. The potions classroom remained oppressive, but Wizette was not affected. He rather enjoyed the quiet focus. Whether slugs, snake fangs, dried fluxweed, or porcupine quills, each material had its own magic symbol. With the help of his magic eye, Wizette placed each ingredient into the pot and watched the symbols break, reshape, and recombine into intricate patterns. He loved the process, like a painter sketching materials into curious pictures. As Snape had said at the start, destruction and rebirth both lived inside the steaming cauldron. The mixture in the cauldron turned a deep green, then shifted to a cloudy blue and began to bubble loudly. Wizette glanced to the side. Hannah, it's bubbling now. You should stir it 5 times clockwise. Okay, Hannah said, nodding, and carefully stirred. After she stirred, the large bubbles shrank into fisheye beads, the cloudy blue cleared, and impurities slowly gathered toward the center. The potion became a clear, light blue, and then those impurities rose and formed a pure pink smoke at the rim of the cauldron. It's so beautiful! Hannah flushed with excitement and eagerly grabbed a porcupine quill, ready to toss it in. Wizette quickly reminded her, Hannah, you need to remove it from the heat before adding the porcupine quill. I almost forgot, she cried, snatching a rag, lifting the cauldron off the flame, and dropping in the quill. The quill melted in the residual heat, scattering into tiny specks of starlight that dotted the potion. Snape strode over, scooped some of the pimple cure potion with a spoon, and examined it. First time making a potion? Never learned before? Wizette shot back. I've helped Mr. Lovegood squeeze Godigeon for tea. Does that count? Godigeon tea? Snape's hand trembled as he looked at Wizette with unexpected gravity. Don't be taken in by absurd theories. Can you actually do that? Wizette was a little puzzled. You mean Mr. Lovegood? I think what he and Luna say makes a lot of sense. You do have some talent, Snape said at last, dryly. He moved on, changing the subject. Since you've finished your potion, why don't you check on your classmates? Do you want to stand out from the crowd? All right, Professor Snape, Wizette said calmly. He and Hannah began to move through the room, like a counter to Snape's fear. Where Snape brought dread, Wizette brought hope. Using his magic eye, Wizette assessed the completeness of each material's magic symbols and helped students improve their potion making. Before long, every student Wizette assisted had successfully completed their pimple cure potion. In their eyes, the once threatening cauldrons now looked pleasing. Even the rising pink smoke seemed like celebratory fireworks. The bell finally rang. A collective sigh of relief swept the room as the students leaned toward Wizette, eager to say something. A cold voice cut through the bustle. Do you want to stay and clean the classroom? Professor Snape asked without hurry, his eyelids half closed. Like startled birds, everyone snapped their books shut and scrambled for the door. Wizette, Stay and tidy up, Snape said abruptly. Michael and the others offered him hollow goodbyes and waved as they filed out. Hannah hesitated at the doorway, cheeks flushed. Can I stay too? Snape snorted, but didn't answer directly. Vizette waved her off. There isn't much to clean. I can manage. If it weren't for you, I never would have finished the potion, Hannah said, rolling up her sleeves and beginning to wipe the tables. Thank you. Vizette smiled softly and picked up the broom and dustpan tucked in the corner, sweeping up bits of snake fang and dried fluxweed. Thump, thump, thump. The mortar clinked as Snape ground the ingredients. He moved with cool, economical precision, as if no one else existed. 10 steady presses, and the snake fangs were powdered to an impossibly fine dust. He didn't pluck the slugs with tweezers. He pinched them between his fingers before placing them on the steamer, judging them by feel. Every motion was practiced, efficient. Snape's confidence allowed him to use higher heat and shorten the brewing time. In 10 minutes, a clean pink smoke unfurled like a blossom, the sign the pimple cure had been completed. He looked up at Vizette and asked, flat and cold, "Well, what did you see?" Vizette thought for a moment, then answered aloud. A real familiarity with potion ingredients. Every handling of the snake fangs and the dry fluxweed was precise. You kneaded the slugs by hand to judge their quality, so you knew not to open the steamer. That saved the best slugs. Before adding the porcupine quills, you scraped away surface impurities. Those little details made the potion flawless. That was most useful to me. Not bad, Snape said, voice unreadable. You aren't as dull as I thought. Talent sets the ceiling, but potions isn't simple. Experience matters just as much. You have to be able to judge ingredients by feel to go far. 5 points to Ravenclaw. You may go. Hannah's hand flew to her mouth in disbelief. 5 points? He actually. She cut herself off. Thank you, Professor Snape. We'll be on our way. Vizette thought he saw a flicker of approval in Snape's eyes, but just as quickly it was gone, leaving him wondering if he'd imagined it. Outside, by the entrance to the Great Hall, Hannah was still a little dazed. This is the first time I've ever heard Snape say so much, and he gave you 5 points. 5! Professors can add and subtract points, Vizette said. Cho Chang told me every teacher has that power. Hannah glanced back toward the dungeon hallway and lowered her voice. Snape's different. He usually only awards points to Slytherin. He deducts from the other houses. Seems I'm lucky, then, Vizette replied with a small smile. After the morning in potions, Vizette's standing among the Hufflepuff first years had improved. Passing the Hufflepuff table now earned him friendly smiles. Madame Pomfrey's medical advice had helped too. After a midday of quiet meditation, he felt refreshed walking into History of Magic. The classroom sat on the castle's second floor, orderly, well-ventilated, and bright. Afternoon sunlight washed the room in warmth, making the benches feel peaceful. Professor Binns, being the only ghost instructor at Hogwarts, had his own way of arriving, passing through the wall and hovering to the podium as the bell tolled. It's time. Let us begin class, he intoned, flat and unvarying. He took no role, barely glanced at the students, and launched into his lecture in his endless monotone. There was a period of stable prosperity between wizards and muggles, wizards living in muggle villages, trading potions and healing for necessities. Emeric the Evil rose in southern England and established a reign of terror. His appearance was the fuse for the muggle witch hunts. The relationship between wizards and muggles broke down. Wizards moved away from muggle villages. Though muggles could not face adult wizards, they could persecute wizard children. The warm sunlight and Binns's droning voice were perfect sleep aids. Around Vizette, even roommates who had meant to take diligent notes succumbed, heads bobbed, eyes closed, and the classroom fell into that quiet hush of half-sleep. Soon only 2 sounds remained, Professor Binns's lecture and the rustle of Vizette's pen. The History of Magic textbook was thick and dense. Copying it all wouldn't make it easy to memorize, but Binns did more than read. He refined and summarized the material, distilling what was essential. The nuggets of insight were there, buried in the long delivery, like gold seams waiting to be prospected. As revenge for their children's harm, some wizards turned to torture and murder of muggles. Binns droned on. The rise of dark wizards increased muggle fear, leading to escalated witch hunts and more tragic deaths of wizard children. Wizards developed measures specifically to ward off muggles, muggle-repelling charms, anti-muggle doorknobs. These measures widened the gap further, reducing contact between the two worlds. Listening, Wizette began to see how history explained the wizards' retreat into a separate world. Wizards were born with magic. Their instinct was to solve problems with it. When danger came from muggles, their answer was enchantment and barrier rather than negotiation. Muggles, in turn, created tools and institutions to shape their world. The differences were parallel responses to hardship. Thinking like that, Wizette felt the unexpected pull of history of magic, not dull facts, but the logic of why a whole people had chosen separation. The bell rang, and his roommates blinked awake, wiping sleep from their mouths. Terry rubbed his eyes. "Wizette, you look refreshed. Were you actually listening?" "I was taking notes," Wizette said contentedly. "History of magic is fascinating." Michael patted his own face and grinned. "Maybe this is Ravenclaw for you, diligent even when Professor Binns is putting everyone to sleep." Wizette smiled and turned to look out the window. The afternoon light made the castle stones glow. For the first time, the idea of writing letters didn't feel difficult. There were so many interesting things to tell. 34. Luna and the letter Devonshire. The village of Ottery St. Catchpole, the Lovegood house. On a bright morning, the pink and blue curtains swayed in a gentle breeze. Warm sunlight poured through the window, dust motes drifting like grains of golden sand across the bedroom floor. The girl made a cat-like murmur and slowly opened her eyes. She sat up on the edge of the bed, pale golden hair falling around her like a waterfall. Luna rubbed her eyes, stretched lazily, and looked at the clear blue sky beyond the window. "What a beautiful day," she whispered. Going downstairs, she glanced at the closed door not far away. The smile on her lips faded. The door had not been opened since yesterday. "Yesterday was the first day at Hogwarts," she murmured to herself. "I won't start until next year." Xenophilius was already in the dining room, hair mussed, a writing board in one hand and a charcoal pencil tucked behind his ear, sketching ideas for the next issue of the Quibbler. "Luna, today is perfect for painting," he said, setting a simple breakfast before her. Luna sat at the table and picked up her knife and fork. "Yes," she said, looking out at the sky. "It's like a blue curtain." The dining room was quiet, except for the soft scratch of charcoal and the occasional clink of cutlery. Xenophilius set down his board and regarded her with concern. "Luna, are you all right? You don't like the breakfast?" "I'm fine, Father." Luna shook her head gently. She didn't want him to worry, so she changed the subject. "Is the new issue ready? I'm eager to see it." The last issues were well received. Vizette had some good ideas, Xenophilius brightened. "We've had more submissions lately. They're very keen on the local specialties column. Some readers even sent samples. I mixed a little into the bread this morning." The contributor said the bees collected laurel honey, and those who eat laurel honey reap good luck. "How does it taste?" "So that was Vizette's idea," Luna murmured, tasting a piece of bread and smiling a little. "It's very good." Luna's days passed in a slow, steady rhythm, like a diligent bee tending the garden. Her owls, Diana and others, accompanied her, their hoots and rustlings cheerful company as she collected dew, loosened soil, watered flowers, and fed the plants. She found small pleasures in the ordinary tasks, but something felt slightly off, as if a piece were missing. "The mistletoe and dirigible plums are growing very well. No nargles found," she announced one afternoon as she picked the plump fruit. "Vizette, do you know about nargles? Father says they look like little maggots, with 3,000 teeth when they're young, and even more when they grow up. They have 3 eyes and a scythe-like hook on their tails, which is why they're called nargles. Vizette, isn't that interesting?" There was no gentle reply. Only the sound of wind in the branches answered her. With the closed door, it felt as though other things had been shut away too. "Yes," she told herself, "he went to Hogwarts." Luna walked to the brook and sat on the bank, watching the clear water ripple over stones. Only a day had passed, and yet an odd hollow fluttered in her chest. "The blibbering humdingers have increased," she murmured to the dirigible plums, trying to fill the quiet with familiar nonsense. Time would mend it, she thought. Given a few days, she would grow used to life without one particular friend. Change was nothing new for her. The sky remained clear, and the stream still sang, but she felt as if she were drifting slowly away from everything she knew. She sat by the water until the sound of a familiar hoot made her look up. Who? Who? An owl swooped in, clutching a large cloth sack and wobbling like a little propeller plane with torn wings. Luna lunged and barely caught him before he toppled into the stream. Saul, I caught you! Who? Who? Saul struggled, rubbed against her sleeve, and then settled, eyes closing. She stroked the owl's droopy crest. He must be tired bringing so many things from Hogwarts. At home, Xenophilius had just removed his apron, and there was a pot of steaming stew on the table. I was about to look for you. Why are you back so late? He said when he saw her. Luna carefully put the cloth bag on the table and held Saul like a small, warm friend. Saul brought a parcel. That boy still remembers to send letters? Xenophilius raised an eyebrow as he took the owl. He glanced into the bag. I'll give Saul a tonic. He looks exhausted. Inside the bag were 2 large boxes of chocolate frogs, so heavy Luna understood at once why Saul had been weary. Beneath them lay a thick parchment envelope. On the outside, in uneven handwriting, was written, To Luna and Mr. Lovegood. The words "and Mr. Lovegood" spaced far apart, as if added later. Luna's fingers went to her chest, and she felt her heart quicken. She breathed out and opened the letter. Dear Luna and Mr. Lovegood, Saul brought me a bag of chocolate frogs. They taste wonderful, and I wanted to share them with you and Mr. Lovegood. Hogwarts is incredible and very magical. I have seen so many interesting things, too many to describe. I think it will be all right because you will come to Hogwarts next year, and then we can explore it together. How are the mistletoe and dirigible plums at home? I remember the dirigible plums were almost ripe. The last time I helped with the fertilizer, you mentioned nargles. What are they like? I'm still very curious. You left me in suspense last time. Would you tell me about them now? There are still so many wonders at Hogwarts. I hope I'm not being too wordy if I send more letters. P.S. Please say hello to Mr. Lovegood for me. I hope you are both well. Vizette Lovegood. The letter was plain and honest, and that plainness drew Luna closer. Vizette. In her mind was not a blazing sun, but a soft breeze, always there and quietly comforting. With him she could say anything without feeling foolish. She opened one of the chocolate frog boxes. The chocolate was smooth and rich, melting pleasantly on her tongue. The sweetness warmed her heart. Also, P.S. Xenophilius called from the table as Saul, now perked up, dozed on his shoulder. Luna, will you write back? Tell him to be more careful next time. When addressing me, don't put "and" or "also" before my name. Okay, Father. Luna laughed. She put the envelope away, took down her painting box from the cupboard, and raced up the stairs. Didn't you say this morning that today was perfect for painting? She sang as she ran. 35. Transfiguration Magic Class. Gaining Hufflepuff's favor had been a pleasant surprise. At breakfast, Vizette kept getting different jars of jam from his Hufflepuff classmates. According to Hannah and the others, these jams were special provisions for teachers. Hufflepuff had the privilege of sampling them. Vizette had to admit they tasted unusual. Through the magic eye, he could see the faint magical sigils inside each preserve. Those symbols were the source of the flavors. At noon, a sleek feathered owl wheeled into the great hall, circled once above the tables, and settled on Vizette's shoulder. He stroked the bird's crest. You've worked hard. It must be tiring going back and forth. The owl nuzzled his cheek with its beak, flapped, and flew off toward the owlery, probably ready for a long sleep. When Vizette broke the seal on the envelope, his roommates were already craning to look. Chris peered at the envelope trimmed with a circle of mistletoe. Who sent this? It's so fancy. Must be your sister, Michael said, guessing with the enthusiasm of a hound. She sent it. Inside was a short note, a tiny bottle, and a pendant shaped like a dirigible plum. The roommates crowded closer. What is that? Terry asked. A miniature carrot pendant. That's a new one. What's in the bottle? Seeds, Michael squinted. Dirigible plum seeds. Vizette held the pendant up so they could see. It's a dirigible plum charm. Supposedly it helps you accept unusual things. Anthony frowned. Dirigible plum? Helps accept unusual things? You mean it can keep me awake in history of magic? Vizette grinned. Professor Binns has a special kind of magic. If you get used to his tone, you can learn to extract something from it. Luna had written a simple letter, a meandering account of her day. She wrote about harvesting dirigible plums from the garden, tasting chocolate frogs, and sketching in her room. She mentioned Xenophilius's praise for Vizette and sent the pendant, hoping it might spark his inspiration. Vizette fastened the rosy plum around his neck and let his thoughts drift to a garden in the Scottish Highlands, full of strange, magical plants. That afternoon, Ravenclaw combined with Gryffindor for transfiguration. When Vizette entered the classroom, a cluster of Gryffindors were gathered at the podium, teasing a tabby cat that sat imperiously on the wood. No matter how they prodded and joked, the cat remained impassive. Vizette watched the markings, especially the dark patches around its eyes, and felt a prickling sense of recognition. He remembered the Runespore incident. A similar cat had appeared then, and it had been Professor McGonagall in animagus form. His roommates wanted to join the teasing, but Vizette waved them off. Anthony, still staring at the cat, whispered, "Don't you like cats? That pattern is amazing, like little spectacles around its eyes." "This isn't just any cat," Vizette began. The class bell cut him off. The tabby stretched, leaped from the podium, and in midair resolved into a woman in emerald robes. "Good afternoon," Professor McGonagall said crisply. "Gryffindors," the students shouted as if roused by a bell, scrambling back into their seats and suddenly serious. Anthony, hushed, asked, "How did you know?" Vizette answered softly, "You said it yourself. The markings look like eyeglass frames. Those patterns are rare." McGonagall's face hardened. "Perhaps to some of you, transfiguration seems as harmless as a cat, something to prod and laugh at, no cost, no danger." She paced the front of the room. "In truth, transfiguration is one of the most complex and dangerous branches of magic you will learn here. I do not want any of you injured, or worse, because of carelessness. If anyone is deliberately reckless in this class, I will have them removed from these lessons. I will not allow arrogance to lead to an accident. Remember that." The students nodded, chastened, and her voice softened. "For our first lesson, what you need to master is not just the spells, but caution. Approach transfiguration with a careful mind. Even if your subject looks harmless, keep your guard up and prevent it from becoming what you fear." "Turn to page 4 of A Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration," she continued, "and let's begin by understanding the techniques behind a successful change." Transfiguration had always felt daunting to Vizette. He had copied the textbook into a notebook, but the concepts only half sank in. McGonagall, however, had a way of unraveling the dense theory into clear steps. Drawing on experience, she broke down the principles, and the abstract ideas became manageable. Half the lesson passed before she moved to practical work. She handed each student a match and set the task: transform the match into a needle. The room buzzed with impatience. After a long stint of theory, everyone wanted to try. For a moment, the air filled with competing incantations. As McGonagall had warned, transfiguration could be treacherous. A flash of multicolored light burst from several wands. Some matches exploded with sharp bangs, scattering sparks. McGonagall was quick. With a flick, she shaped the stray embers into tiny birds. They twittered, circled the classroom once, and vanished. "Focus! Be cautious," she called. "Your target must be precise. Imagine the needle, its shape, its size, its texture." Her demonstration calmed the students and raised their determination. When she reached Vizette's desk, she noticed he hadn't rushed to cast a spell. He had closed his eyes and was picturing the transformation. Catching her gaze, he opened his eyes. The image in his mind was clear enough now. All he needed was the incantation. "Vera Verto," he said. "Keep it essential." Keep it essential. Performing transfiguration felt wonderful. With the spell, Vizette's consciousness spread over the surface of the matchstick, as if becoming a pair of hands that could knead it with intent. It felt like a childhood memory of molding clay, a clear goal, and the joy of making something with one's hands. An image of a silver needle formed in his mind. He fed his will into the matchstick, and it began to lengthen and sharpen. He pushed for more detail: a shimmering metallic sheen, a delicate point, an eye for threading. The matchstick on the table kept changing. Its grain and red tip faded, its edges softened. A bright metallic luster emerged. The form stretched and thinned until the end narrowed into a fine needlepoint. This is his first time casting the spell, and he actually succeeded? Anthony glanced at the transformed object and couldn't help praising, "That was fast." Professor McGonagall nodded. Transfiguration required both caution and patience. Wizett had closed his eyes and imagined first, not rushing, a cautious sign. The transformation proceeded in orderly stages, each change deliberate, not greedy for instant success. He hadn't stopped because the magic wasn't finished. A threaded eye appeared at the needle's end, and delicate patterns bloomed across its surface. McGonagall leaned closer and recognized the design, a mistletoe motif. The pattern elevated the object from a simple tool to something finer. Creating such intricate detail by will alone was the work of imagination, a unique advantage of a witch or wizard. She held the silver needle up and announced, "Mr. Lovegood has completed the transfiguration. He has turned a matchstick into a silver needle. 5 points to Ravenclaw." All eyes turned to her. Engorgement charm, Professor McGonagall cast, and the tiny needle lengthened and thickened into an ornately carved awl. She raised the awl for the class to see. "This is an excellent transfiguration. Beyond the eye for threading, Mr. Lovegood gave it beautiful patterns." Anthony clapped Vizette on the shoulder. "Not only did you make a needle, but it's patterned too. You're making me look bad." "Finite incantatum." McGonagall returned the awl to its original size. "Vizette, well done. Thank you." Vizette took the needle and then asked, curious, "Professor McGonagall, is this needle wood or metal now?" "An interesting question." She smiled. "You only changed the appearance of the matchstick, so it is still wood. Can transfiguration change the very essence of the matchstick, make it a true silver needle?" "Of course, but I wouldn't recommend it." McGonagall's tone turned serious. "The danger of transfiguration lies precisely there. With inanimate objects, altering the essence might make them less fragile or more useful. But what if you try to change your own essence? If you change your essence, are you still yourself? A true body of steel would require your essence to be steel too, and you would lose the original one." Wizet's mouth fell open. A cold shiver ran down his spine. McGonagall watched his reaction and nodded. "Essence. In my view, the essence of a wizard comes from thoughts, desires. In short, the soul. When your body changes, but your soul is replaced, are you the same person? If not, then who are you? These are questions we must consider. The soul is a fascinating subject. To probe the mysteries of magic, to study the soul, is indispensable. Many wanders into darkness doing just that, taking pleasure in manipulating souls." She shook her head. "I seem to have said too much. Just remember, if you wish to go further in transfiguration, you must recognize and preserve your essence. If you're curious, look up information on animagus." Her words went beyond the syllabus, but they meant a great deal to Vizette. The magical world was full of secrets, and he hurriedly jotted down everything she had said. The class still had time, and soon students crowded around Vizette, asking for tips. He answered generously, explaining others' confusions helped cement his own understanding. "You don't have to be so hard on yourself. Try sharpening one end of the matchstick first, one step at a time. Didn't you see? The color has lightened. That's a good start. Changing color first is fine. Don't be so nervous. Hold your wand a little farther away. That little explosion earlier was an accident. If you're worried, break off the red phosphorus tip. The important thing is to try." Watching Vizette surrounded by classmates, McGonagall sighed softly. She felt a twinge of envy for Flitwick. How had Ravenclaw gotten such a student? Hermione had also performed well. She could shape the beginnings of a needle. It was a pity she didn't always relate well to others. Her answers could sound preachy. Now McGonagall understood a little of what Dumbledore admired in Vizette, the modest, harmonious nature he kept with others, even after suffering at the hands of dark wizards, was rare. Vizette also showed signs of talent for occlumency. Whether and how Dumbledore would help him develop that gift remained to be seen. Hogsmeade. Dumbledore stepped through the firelight and appeared on the second floor of the Hog's Head. Not long after, hurried footsteps sounded. A tall, gaunt man with a gray beard appeared and raised an eyebrow. "Why are you here?" he asked gruffly. Dumbledore replied softly, "Aberforth, I need your help. First-year classes at Hogwarts were relaxed, and Friday mornings were free." After breakfast, Vizette left the castle and walked across the lawn toward the Forbidden Forest. Hagrid had sent him an owl the day before, inviting him to visit and asking how he'd been. Hagrid had been one of the few people who hadn't treated Vizette with suspicion when he first arrived, and after their meeting in Diagon Alley, Vizette didn't want to refuse. He was curious about the Forbidden Forest, and Hagrid's hut sat right on its edge. Hagrid called it a hut, but to Vizette it looked like a giant's house. The oak doorframe alone must have been nearly 4 meters tall, and the single story felt like 2. The place looked like a rustic farmhouse, with odd tools hanging everywhere. Before Vizette could knock, a dull bark rolled out from nearby. "Oh, Vizette must be here." Hagrid's voice boomed. "Fang, slow down! You'll scare him!" A gust of wind and a massive black dog came bursting out. Tongue lolling, the dog lunged at Vizette. "Hey, Fang! You'll scare him!" Hagrid followed, catching the dog by the scruff and lifting him easily. Fang was a Neapolitan Mastiff, his wrinkled, solemn face making him look almost melancholy. At a meter tall, he was enormous, but in Hagrid's hands he had no room to struggle. "He's excited. Not many students come here during the day," Hagrid said, waving Vizette in. "He's really gentle, a bit timid, usually." Fang sniffed Vizette all over, then rolled onto his back, offering his belly for a rub. "You're a friend of mine, so he'll be good to you," Hagrid said cheerfully. "If there's proper danger, he'll do what's right, but he's mostly a softie." Inside, the hut was one large room, a huge table and chairs beside a great fireplace, a bed piled with a patchwork quilt in the corner, umbrellas, a huge leather coat, a crossbow, and other strange implements dangled from the walls. The fireplace was big enough to hang smoked meat and chickens on either side, with room in the middle for a copper kettle and baking tray. "Have some tea." "I just baked these," Hagrid said. He put the tray down in front of Vizette and took the kettle to brew. "How are you finding it here?" he asked, tearing a chunk of cake off to give Fang. "It's different from your old life, I suppose, but you'll get used to it." Click, click. Fang's teeth sounded as he chewed the cake like it was a huge bone. Vizette's jaw twitched. He'd been used to smaller things than a mastiff's bite. "Thanks." He took the teacup and blew on it. "I had breakfast already, so tea is fine." "No need to be polite here," Hagrid said, taking a cake the size of a head and biting in. "You can consider Hogwarts your second home." At first, Hagrid's size and age put people off, but once you got to know him, he was simple, forthright, and generous. He told Vizette about his younger days, how he'd been expelled after an incident and missed the chance to continue his education at Hogwarts. He talked at length about the Forbidden Forest, about the many magical creatures and plants that lived there. The Weasley twins liked to sneak in and experiment, he said. Once they'd even tried to lure centaurs, which could have gone very badly for both the twins and the forest's inhabitants. "They're slippery little rascals," Hagrid chuckled. "Every time I've got to hunt for them, it takes ages. Luckily, they're in 3rd year now. Give it a few years and I might get a bit of peace." "Little darlings," Vizette thought ruefully about Hagrid's affectionate phrase. "Which creatures do you like best in the forest?" "There are so many." Hagrid's voice brightened. "Thestrals, Demiguise, Occamys, Hippogriffs, unicorns." His smile grew with every name. "They're all my children." He lifted the copper kettle and pulled a mat from under it. "This is an Occamy crest feather, brilliant insulation, and it stretches." He wiped off the dust, revealing iridescent blue-green feathers, and held them at both ends. The crest feather stretched out like a fan, then shrank back to the size of a palm in his hand. There were other creature-made things around the hut. A roll of bandages hanging on the wall was woven from unicorn tail hair. Even the greasy old handbag by the bed was made from the same. "When I bought Fluffy," Hagrid said casually, "I had to sell some unicorn tail hair. I'll have to find more soon. The bandages are running low." Vizette's breath caught. "Bandages? You use unicorn tail hair for bandages?" "That's right," Hagrid nodded. "I didn't finish school, so I learned by doing. The creatures in the forest get hurt. Bandages made from unicorn tail hair help them heal faster and don't stop them moving around." Vizette had some knowledge of prices in the wizarding world. A single strand of unicorn tail hair could fetch 10 galleons, and a single bandage would take lots of strands. Hagrid, it seemed, was a hidden rich man. The value of that handbag alone was enormous. As gamekeeper, he could also collect more materials from the forest, which helped. Vizette stood and asked, a little formally, "Hagrid, when I learn healing magic, if I help heal the forest creatures, could I have some unicorn tail hair?" "Eh? Of course." Hagrid blinked, then scratched the back of his head. If you want some, just tell me. Chapter 38, Flying Lessons. It was noon when Vizette said goodbye to Hagrid and left the hut. Hagrid, relying on his size, had stuffed a handful of things into his pockets before Vizette left, unicorn tail hair among them, and a jumble of other ingredients Hagrid hadn't had time to name. Vizette felt a pleasant lightness in his head, a state that seemed perfect for the flying lesson that afternoon. The weekend was almost here. With so many materials to study, he could finally research wand-making, look into healing charms, and read more about animagi like Professor McGonagall had mentioned. He wanted to learn everything. There were 2 classes that afternoon, herbology with Professor Sprout and the flying lesson he hadn't yet taken. Herbology was held in the greenhouse, and first years didn't get to work with many rare plants. Before school even started, Vizette had already learned a lot from Luna, how to dig, fertilize, and care for specimens, and he moved through the tasks easily, even earning extra points from Professor Sprout. Still muddy, he packed his books to go straight to the lawn for flying. Vizette, aren't you going to wash up? You can't go like that, Chris called, pulling him back. A sturdily built, black-haired Slytherin girl nearby, who'd been sharing the herbology bench, spoke up with obvious contempt. That's right, a dirty obscurial. No matter how much you wash, you'll never be clean. Vizette smiled. You'd think a wizard could manage something a bit more magical. He drew his wand, traced a graceful S in the air, and said, Scouring Charm. In an instant, the mud vanished and his robes were spotless. He continued the spell, casually sweeping the grime away from his roommates as well. He spread his hands and called lightly, Need help getting cleaned up? Or do it yourself if you like. The Slytherin's face burned crimson. You? His roommates burst into laughter at Vizette's calm little show. A thin-lipped girl stepped up and said, Millicent, let's go. Pansy, brushing past, added with a sniff, Really, Bulstrode, control yourself. Millicent Bulstrode's face went an even darker red. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes. She could only cover her face and run off. What was that about? Terry asked. Because he's an obscurial, Anthony said, frowning. People who reject or fear magic can become obscurials. Those traits are usually associated with muggles. Slytherin is all about purebloods and despising muggleborns, Michael added. It's not surprising. I wish they had your magic, Michael said, looping an arm through Vizette's. How come you're friends with Cho Chang and know spells like that? I'm jealous. Vizette explained. I learned the scouring charm from Cho. It's very useful for everyday life. Want me to lend you my notes? Save it for later, Michael waved him off. Let's hurry. Broomsticks might already be out. We should pick the best ones. People had always dreamed of the sky. Wizards had simply found a better way to reach it. Brooms had answered that longing, and from them Quidditch was born. Madame Hooch taught flying and refereed Quidditch at Hogwarts. She arrived early and had already arranged the brooms in 2 neat rows. Terry leaned over and whispered, Her eyes do look like an eagle's. Madame Hooch had short, tidy gray hair and bright yellow eyes that really did resemble an eagle's. Her sight was just as sharp. When Michael tried to grab a broom before class, she pounced immediately. Put the broom back on the ground. Even if you know how to use one, wait until I tell you which broom to pick up. Michael yelped and dropped the broom. Sorry, Madame Hooch. Madame Hooch coughed twice, a little embarrassed. I should apologize. I'm being overly cautious. Yesterday I taught 2 other houses and 1 child had an accident. I have to be strict. Who was it? A dozen voices asked. Neville Longbottom from Gryffindor, Hannah supplied. He broke his wrist. It must have hurt. Small groups of Hufflepuffs had formed, swapping stories excitedly. Draco Malfoy took Neville's things. Harry Potter and Malfoy got into it. Harry's the Seeker now. Vizette and his friends exchanged puzzled looks. How is he the Seeker already? Tryouts aren't until the weekend. The bell rang and Madame Hooch clapped her hands. Everyone's here. Let's begin. First, stand next to a broom, she instructed. Do not touch it with your hands. Wait. The students hesitated, half laughing, half nervous. Place the hand closest to the broom over it. Don't move. Now, call out up. When the broom comes into your palm, grab it and stop. Wait for my next instruction. They took it step by step to avoid more accidents. After a round of practice, not everyone managed to catch their broom. Hufflepuff brooms tended to roll a couple of times on the ground before flying up into their owner's hands. Hannah's broom seemed stubbornly unresponsive, and she flushed with worry. Ravenclaws, maybe because their common room was higher up and they were used to thinking about the sky, did better. With a few tries, their brooms answered. Wizet's broom, however, was unusually obedient. He hadn't even said up, he'd merely thought of it, and the broom shot straight into his palm. Chapter 39. A Natural Talent for Flying. Being able to summon brooms had only been the first step. The school brooms were old, and calling them to hand wasn't always easy. Some would drop halfway, a few shed twigs as they rolled along the ground. Once everyone had a grip on the handles, Madame Hooch resumed her careful instructions. She showed them the ready stance and the precautions, taught a few small tricks, and demonstrated how to stay on without slipping. "All right," she said, nerves showing as sweat beaded on her forehead. "When I blow the whistle, mount your broom. Use a push from your legs to lift off. Don't be frightened, this is just a flying class, not a competition. Hold on tight to the broom. When you want to rise, pull the handle up. To descend, lean forward and press the handle down. The broom will bring you to the ground. Wait for my whistle, don't be nervous." She bit her whistle and mounted her own broom first, looking very cautious. The students followed, straddling their brooms. When the whistle blew, they all rose into the air together, and thankfully, no one fell. Madame Hooch's tone lightened considerably. "Very good. Now try landing. Don't hurry. Take it slow." After a few controlled descents, she moved on to hovering and turning in midair. Those were harder skills. Beginners needed time to adapt. When Vizette slid through a perfect S-shaped maneuver, Michael couldn't help but blurt, "Vizette, how did you learn that? Madame Hooch hasn't even taught us yet." Vizette shook his head. He had wondered the same thing. Flying felt as easy as drinking water. Then he realized why. He was an Obscurial. When he had transmigrated into this body, he had manifested as an Obscurus, and that entity's innate affinity with flight made broom work almost second nature. If he hadn't worried about startling Madame Hooch, he would have flown higher and tried riskier moves. "How are you so good?" Michael sighed. "I was here first. I touched the broom before you." "You were first to touch it," Chris snorted, "but then Madame Hooch shouted and you got scared and dropped it." "Exactly," Terry agreed. "You bailed, so that's why you're flying like that now." Michael tried to defend himself. "This broom's too old. Look, it's still losing branches in flight. I'm being careful for safety." "Good point," Anthony called from above, teasing. "You could take Madame Hooch's place teaching safety." "You're no better," Michael shot back. He clamped his legs around the broom head and lay along the handle, wobbling forward with a wink. "See? This is how to ride a broom safely." "When have I ever flown like that?" Anthony snapped, his face reddening. Only a few snickers answered. Vizette just shook his head. "Safety first," he said mildly. "Nothing wrong with that." Bolstered by Wizet's comment, Anthony pushed back. "You just wait." Fueled by anger, Anthony charged upward. Michael was still laughing and made no move to get out of the way. Anthony lost his head and slammed straight into him. The brooms groaned in protest. The impact sent them careening apart in opposite directions, like repelling magnets. "You two," Madame Hooch barked, instantly on edge. She blew her whistle again. "Everyone, get down, now!" Before she could finish, she dived on her broom and landed a step ahead of Michael. She dropped to the ground and lunged, catching him before he tumbled. Neither of them was hurt, but the class was far from calm. "Look up," someone screamed. Anthony's broom was smoking green and climbing fast, carrying him toward the castle at a dangerous angle. Madame Hooch, mounting again, sounded near desperation. She was too far away to intercept. A trip to Madame Pomfrey's infirmary seemed inevitable. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw someone cut through the sky. Vizette was streaking after Anthony. Wind roared in his ears. His robes snapped as he slipped through the air. The old broom beneath him complained and wailed, but he pushed it to its limits. Just as Anthony's trajectory would have taken him through a high classroom window, Vizette raised his wand and murmured, "Robe, Accio." A force yanked at Anthony's robes and snagged him, keeping his body from smashing through the glass. The broom beneath Anthony cracked under the strain and split in two. He gave a terrified scream as he began to fall, flailing for anything to hold on to. The students shielded their eyes. Some imagined the worst, Diffindo tearing fabric, blood splattering. Wizet's first summoning charm had slowed him, but the strain was tearing the robe. Anticipating that, Vizette dove like an arrow and cast again. He had not been idle since arriving at Hogwarts. Besides absorbing everything he was taught, he had spent his spare time exploring the castle and experimenting. The ancient magic he had gathered while probing secret passages and the Chamber of Secrets had let him refine his summoning charm. He'd enhanced it to bind and haul larger things, large enough to reach a falling student. "Anthony, Accio!" Vizette whispered. Ancient magic poured into his wand. It flared with a brilliant silvery blue light as the spell took hold. An invisible force wrapped around Anthony's whole body, lifting him a few inches off the ground. He choked in a breath of air, the grassy, loamy scent filling his nostrils, and a cold thrill ran down his spine from the memory of almost dying. "Vizette? Mr. Goldstein?" Professor McGonagall's stern voice cut through the field. What happened in flying class this time? 3 minutes earlier. "Professor McGonagall, after tomorrow's Quidditch tryouts, could we use the pitch?" Oliver Wood asked, shadowing her. As Gryffindor's captain, he had one goal, the Quidditch Cup. With Charlie Weasley graduated, that goal had felt that much farther away, until McGonagall had suggested Harry Potter for the team. "Harry is only a first year. He needs more practice with us," she replied. Wood hurried on. "I can talk to Professor Snape. He filed to reserve the pitch the day before yesterday." McGonagall nodded. "I'll see what I can do." "He could practice 2 hours less," Wood pressed. "Half the time each. Perfect." "I'll try." McGonagall turned and fixed Wood with a look. "Why aren't you in History of Magic, Mr. Wood? It's class time." Wood broke into a sweat. His eyes darted around, grasping for anything to hide behind. "Professor, look! Flying class, something's wrong!" McGonagall's patience thinned. "Mr. Wood, answer me directly." Wood went on in a rush, unable to seem interested in anything but Quidditch. He jabbered about speed, dives, and brooms. "Shooting star, an old 1955 model." Then blurted, "He's saving someone. He can save him. Wait. Professor McGonagall, someone's falling." McGonagall snapped her head around. Vizette was in a steep dive, controlling his broom with uncanny precision, while another student plummeted toward the ground. Her pupils went to pinpricks. She drew her wand and moved to create an air cushion, but before she could complete the spell, a silver blue light burst from Vizette's wand and arrested the fall. Both students were safe. McGonagall exhaled and hurried over. "Vizette, Mr. Goldstein, what happened in flying class?" Merlin's beard, Madame Hooch arrived, breathless. "Are you two all right? Did anyone break anything? Off to Madame Pomfrey at once." "That's enough," McGonagall said. "Yesterday a match broke a wrist, and now a broom's gone wrong. Why has it been one thing after another?" "You're overreacting, Madame Hooch." McGonagall straightened her glasses. "Accidents in flying class happen. Don't fret." "Vizette, Mr. Goldstein, do you feel ill? Do you need the hospital wing?" Hooch was already clutching at her heart. "No, no." Anthony waved her off. "It was thrilling. I nearly thought I was done for." "Stop talking," Hooch snapped, clutching her chest. 2 days running, Professor Trelawney said I'd have bad luck lately." "Professor Trelawney?" McGonagall raised an eyebrow. "There's no need to be alarmed. It was an accident." Wood had picked up the faulty broom and was examining it. "It's an accident, all right," he muttered. "The branches are too old to be safe. Even if nothing had happened today, something would have. These brooms are 40 or 50 years old. Antique. We should replace the batch before we lose talent because of them." "Madame Hooch, back to class," McGonagall ordered. "I'll file for a replacement set of brooms." She looked at Wood. "You should get back to your lesson, too." Hooch shepherded Vizette and the others away. Wood hesitated, torn between duty and desire. As they left, he turned back, almost pleading. "Professor McGonagall, can Vizette join our team? I've never seen Harry's full strength, but I saw Vizette just now. If Harry and Vizette were both on Gryffindor." "We'd win the cup this year," Wood finished, eyes shining. "If we don't win, I'll eat spaghetti standing on my head. Mr. Wood, hurry back to class." McGonagall barked, "or I'll have to deduct house points." Wood fled like a man chased by dementors. McGonagall covered her face with a hand for a moment and sighed. She wanted Vizette on the team as much as Wood did. She just couldn't pluck a Ravenclaw away from his house. Late that night, in the headmaster's office, Dumbledore leafed through a copy of today's Transfiguration. A week has passed. What do you think? He asked. Severus Snape paced, each step clipped. Terrible. He's arrogant, mediocre, just like his father. He likes to break rules, to show off, Severus went on with thin venom. He craves attention and doesn't understand his own limits. Ridiculous. Severus, you may be seeing only what you want to see, Dumbledore said softly. Other professors describe him as humble and easygoing. They praise his talent. He's a likable child. Snape's face was a mask. Oh, so what? Dumbledore laid the paper aside. What about the other boy? There was someone once who resembled him, bright in aptitude and handsome besides. He had an insatiable thirst for knowledge and was well liked by the staff. Professor Slughorn favored him. He even let him into the Slug Club. I heard a rumor that you once awarded 5 points to Ravenclaw, Dumbledore continued wryly. That would be no easier than getting into the Slug Club. The memory made Snape's expression sour further. His pacing faltered. Dumbledore watched him. Severus, what do you think of him? Snape's jaw tightened. His voice gained edge. Since you've noticed the similarities, you can nip him in the bud yourself. You don't need to ask me.